3 minutes after 10 is the time. A very good morning to you. The Mayor of London is here, equipped with all the latest technology, which means that he'll be able to introduce the calls himself. And in fact, I won't. Yes, I will. So I'll put him in charge of that shortly. But I need to begin with something that I don't really like talking about. I have a rule. I don't know if you've ever picked up on this. The only time we discuss motoring issues on this programme is when you're here.
Okay.
I try to sort of swim against the tide of radiophone traditions when you can fill hours with talk of potholes and parking tickets and the rest of it. And of course, latterly, ULEZ. But as someone who travels almost exclusively by public transport, I can't get anywhere at the moment. I really can't get anywhere. The roads across the entire capital, to be specific, and this is why I don't really like it as a subject, but if you're trying to get to the station at Boston Manor or Northfields at the moment, the bus stop's about half a mile away from the station because of all the roadworks. If you're coming from Brentford into central London, it's like there's more chicanes than there are at Brands Hatch. What is going on, and how much of it is your fault?
So the way it works is, good morning, James, is
Good morning.
The utility companies for TfL roads pay a lane rental charge. And so for TfL roads, and just a reminder, only 5% of roads in the city, 5% are TfL controlled. So we are very good at coordinating.
And the rest are controlled by the local council.
Exactly.
So you have responsibility for 5% of London roads, right?
Correct. So we coordinate. So, for example, if you're the gas company who wants to dig up roads, we'll say, by the way, before you do, does the electricity company want to dig up roads? Does the 4G, 5G company want to dig up roads? And we coordinate. So there's only one digging up of roads that doesn't cause you inconvenience. And we charge for each day that roads dug up. What we're trying to do is to have a similar scheme for council roads, coordinating those disturbances, because as you say, they affect buses in particular, they affect cars and so forth. So we are working with councils, working with the utility companies to reduce the amount of disruption you talk about.
Well, it's not working, is it?
Well, to give councils...
Why is it so much worse than usual at the moment? It's extraordinary. It's probably the only thing on which everybody listening to this programme, in the capital, I apologise if you're listening in Blackpool, this isn't going to be at the top of your list of priorities. It's probably the only thing we could all agree on, is it has never felt this. But I'm in agreement with Jeremy Clarkson on this issue.
Yeah.
It's extraordinary, the consensus that this is the worst it has ever been. And it's not just utilities. Quite a lot of it is cycle lanes being built, which of course causes disruption and delay.
Well, where Blackpool residents will agree with you is also there's an issue of potholes. And so the government's also, and this is, the government's given councils additional money to address the issue of potholes, which they've got to spend by the end of the financial year. So there are a number of things culminating in the sort of distress you're demonstrating. And by the way, this is also felt by colleagues across the country as well. And that's why we need to have a system that's better coordinated. So you have just a road dug up once a year, a short period of time. The other frustration, James, is people see roads blocked off and no work being undertaken. And that's why I think if you could charge a higher lane rental, that would encourage people, incentivise them to make sure you're working all around the clock to finish that road work, because it means that you're not paying more money in lane rentals.
So we don't really know why things feel much worse than ever then at the moment. Things are much worse than ever. Just an aligning of planets. Is it a coincidence of roadworks?
90% of delays in roads are caused by roadworks. And so we've got to address the issue of roadworks, and we've got to make sure we're better with utility companies, with councils and others. This is not just another problem, I hasten to add.
Okie dokie. On with the call.
Okay, good morning to your listeners as well. The first caller is from West London. I think it's Finlay from Ealing. Hi, Finlay.
Good morning, James and Sadiq. How are you doing?
Not bad, thank you. How are you? Okay?
Very good, thanks. My question is as follows. This week, the Tories are fighting with each other over the disastrous Rwanda policy. The Conservative candidate for mayor backs the policy, but I don't think someone who backs such an immoral, expensive and unworkable scheme is suited to the job of mayor. What do you think about the government's Rwanda policy?
Well, that's a bit of a flippy softball for the opening question. Is anybody vetting this stuff? Extraordinary. Is this because you're picking them yourself now?
Well, look, can I do with the serious issue of the Rwanda policy, which it's really important I address Finlay. And it's really important that park for a second the Rwanda policy. I'm somebody who does not believe in uncontrolled migration. I do not believe in an open doors policy. There's got to be controlled migration. We've got to also make sure we don't conflate the issue of asylum seekers, refugees, with family reunion, with students, with work permits and so forth. And my anxiety, concern and anger about the Rwanda policy, it seems to be determined and dictated by the party interest, the Conservative Party interest, than the national interest. And I just remind you and other listeners that people who are fleeing persecution, looking for a safe haven, What this Rwanda policy will mean is, even if they persuade the British government that they're a genuine refugee, they're a genuine asylum seeker, their future would be in Rwanda, not in London or in this country. And just look back at the history of our city and our country, the contribution made to our city and country by refugees and others. I think this policy is inhumane, it's immoral, and it's unworkable. But what we've seen over the last 2 weeks, though, Finlay, is a good example of a divided party, which, and I think they've come to the end of their time now. It's just a question of, when, not if. They're booted out. We can't be complacent about the results of the next general election, but you've got a situation where we are being deflected by this Rwanda policy, just like a few years ago we were deflected by the Brexit campaign and the Brexit policy. And I'm hoping, Finlay, cooler, calmer heads in the House of Lords prevail.
There was some astonishing polling from YouGov this week. I only saw it yesterday, looking at where the British people think immigration comes from. I don't know if you saw it. 45% of all Britons believe that more people come here illegally than legally. 34% believe that more people come here legally than illegally. I mean, it's so wrong that it is extraordinary on every level, both statistically and, I suppose, intellectually. It's about over 90% of people who come here legally. So the Rwanda policy almost seems to be designed to address this myth.
Yeah, as a consequence of misinformation. Another consequence of misinformation is people thinking wrongly that council homes goes to, inverted commas, foreigners or immigrants, or people thinking wrongly that the reasons why the NHS is struggling, the reason why schools are crumbling, the reason why there's not enough genuine affordable homes is because of the other. And by the way, it's the oldest trick in the book, James, as you know. Rather than addressing people's fears, you play on people's fears and you blame the other. In this case, the other is people who have got no safe passage to come here and are therefore having to rely upon organised criminal gangs in France and elsewhere. And that's why, Phil, I think what the government should be doing is a number of things. Firstly, providing safe routes for people who are genuinely fleeing persecution to come here. Secondly, addressing the massive backlog of asylum cases by employing more caseworkers, but also targeting those criminal gangs in France and across the Mediterranean.
But politically speaking, do you understand how Rishi Sunak has ended up in such a mess on this issue? It's such a bizarre thing to have staked the house on, and yet here he is, sort of being torn apart, watching his own party tear itself to pieces over a policy that won't make much difference to anything in the unlikely event that it actually works. It's extraordinary politics.
Well, the reason why we're seeing this sort of politics is because he's weak. He's a weak man, a weak leader, a weak prime minister. That's why. So he's throwing red meat to his backbenchers, whether it's Lee Anderson or Jacob Rees-Mogg, governing in the party interest rather than the national interest. Rather than, look, how does this policy address the issue of our junior doctors being on strike? How does this address the issue of the huge waiting lists in the NHS? How does this issue address our crumbling schools or the problems with getting a dentist with the cost of living crisis? And it's classic deflection. You'll remember, the polling election expert used by David Cameron. He had this phrase of a dead cat. It's a good example. Look, you and I spent the last 5 minutes, because of Finlay's legitimate question, talking about Rwanda and not the other crisis facing our country. And that's what the government wants us to do.
Well, let's crack on.
Finlay, thanks for your call. The next question is from Brentwood, and it's Shane. Good morning, Shane.
Good morning, gentlemen. I work for a large housing association, and I feel the majority of staff are decent and care, but there's a deliberate and gross negligence by the directors and above. So what are you doing, or what will you do to give these tenants who are often vulnerable a voice from what I would call egregious corporate behaviour?
So Shane, I, in a previous life, was a member of Parliament, and before that was a councillor. And the advantage with those who are tenants in council properties is we had some leverage to make sure the council sorted out the sort of issues you're raising. There's a big problem in relation to the lack of locus, the lack of influence, the lack of levers with those tenants in housing associations. So what I want the government to do is to have an ombudsman with teeth looking after the interest of those in social housing, but also giving tenants like the ones you're describing powers to take action. At the moment, Shane, whether you're a local MP or a councillor, it's very difficult to exert pressure on housing associations. By the way, there are some excellent housing associations. They've had a real problem over the last 14 years because of lack of investment. They're dealing with issues around, the Grenfell Tower legacy, tall buildings, issues around the built environment and carbon emissions, but also mould and damp and so forth. And so some of them do great pieces of work. Others, you're right, aren't being held to account. And giving tenants those powers and that ally on their side would lead to, I think, housing associations that are less good raising their game.
On that, I won't mention any names, but obviously there was a young boy who died in Rochdale.
That's right.
Because of mould. There's been another one. You mentioned the housing ombudsman. They've ruled for one housing association where the tenant suicide was down to the housing association. I know you used to be a lawyer. What about corporate manslaughter charges? Could they be?
Yeah, so unfortunately, the ombudsman currently can only exert any power when there's maladministration, not poor service and all the rest of it and stuff. So very limited powers, very little teeth. I'm afraid in this country, the law around corporate manslaughter isn't as strong as it is in, for example, in America. You will have heard other discussions over the last 3-4 weeks around the post office scandal. And steps that could have been taken against those responsible for what happened with that. I'm afraid in this country we haven't got the powers citizens in the USA have. So we're in my legal hat. What I'd want Parliament to do is to legislate to give more rights to tenants, social tenants in particular, whether they're council tenants or housing associations. But also I want to extend those powers also to private tenants as well. I'm afraid, Shane, the issue of damp, mould, rents being increased, every few months is an issue for those who live privately as well. Generally speaking, those who are tenants in this country get a far worse service than those who are tenants across Europe and other parts of the world. I think that needs addressing.
Why is that?
I think what we saw in the 1980s was a massive deregulation of the housing market, without wishing to go back in relation to Margaret Thatcher's legacy. That deregulation meant that you had a situation where it was, a cowboy world when it came to a number of areas. You'll know in relation to, for example, the Grenfell Tower, one of the reasons why, tenants weren't listened to, raised issues, the Resident Association, was because of lack of regulation. Councils marking their own homework, and you see that across the piece. And so I'm afraid that deregulation wasn't fully rectified when there was the last Labour government. I'm hoping the next Labour government, rectifies the massive deregulation that led to the unlevel playing field.
What percentage of former council homes do you think are now in private landlords' hands?
A significant percentage. I've got the number.
It's not a spot quiz.
No.
I just couldn't believe my eyes. This is from the House of Lords Library, but it must have come up in Parliament quite recently.
It did, yeah. So I've not got the number to hand.
It's more than 40% of former council homes are now in the private rented sector. So it's not quite the revolution that many fans of Margaret Thatcher still proclaim it to be, is it?
There's a figure worse than that, which is for every 6 council homes sold off, only 1 was replenished. So there's two things happening at the same time. One is you're reducing the amount of council housing stock, and those former council homes, subsidised by the taxpayer, are now owned by people who then sublet it, or they let it with a market value rent rather than a council rent, and the stock hasn't been replenished. That's the reason for the housing crisis, not asylum seekers or refugees or migrants and all the rest of it. What the government should be doing is addressing those issues by building significant numbers of additional council homes by fixing the private rental market. Instead, we've got the Rwanda bill.
Thank you for what you do, Shane. It sounds like you're getting it from all angles, but obviously without people like you in that sector, the situation for vulnerable tenants would be even worse.
No, thank you, Shane.
It is already. 10:16 is the time. On with the calls.
Thank you, Shane. The next caller is from South London, and it's Sarah from Croydon. Good morning, Sarah.
Good morning, Sadiq. I'm just going to give you a quick overview of my situation.
Please.
So mid last year, I was given a Section 21. I was evicted, and
that's a no-fault eviction notice for people who don't know. So you just got slung out of your home by the landlord.
Yeah, because he wanted to sell up.
Okay.
And I was given an emergency accommodation by the council. Now, the thing is that being in emergency accommodation, I'm now in perpetual debt and poverty. Now, the reason for this is because, number one, I don't get universal credit. Even though I'm a single parent, I don't get universal credit. My housing benefit that they said that I should pay, so the council is willing to pay only £9.98 for me, and it's £800 per month for just a room. I live with 15 other people. There are only 2 toilets and 1 bathroom. Now, I have to wait to use the bathroom. I have to wait to cook. And because I can't do that constantly, I've had to sign up to the gym. There's no broadband at the house for me to do my work. So I'm paying more for, for Wi-Fi, for data. I spend lots of money on takeaway because I can't wait every single night to feed my child, who is 6 years old. And before, I had £300 to £400 left over for me to buy food and other essentials after my bill. Now, because of ULEZ and because I live so far, I'm spending that £300 and something pounds on ULEZ. So that means every single month I'm wiped out before I even start my month. I've got, for the first time in, over 15 years, I've now got an overdraft. I'm in perpetual overdraft and debt because I can't afford to feed myself, feed my daughter, and even buy essentials. Right now, I'm waiting for payday just to buy milk. Who do I turn to if I can't get universal credit? People like me are left out of the equation because the council says to me, I earn too much. Universal credit says to me, I earn too much. But you've got ULEZ that's come and taken my money that I had to buy these things. Now I don't have anything. Who am I to go to?
Well, Sarah, thanks for your call. Can I deal with the various points you raise in the order you've raised them? So firstly, the housing issue. Secondly, benefits issue. Thirdly, ULEZ issue. So we have got a housing crisis across the country, and the irony is we're spending more money in benefits than we are in bricks and mortar. You mentioned housing benefit and so forth. So what we should be doing is spending more on bricks and mortar, which would reduce the benefits bill that you referred to. So the reason why you've got a gap between the money you receive from housing benefit and your rent is because the housing benefit has not increased with the rent for a number of years because the government froze the amount of money that those in receipt of housing benefit gets. Even though you're working, you're entitled to housing benefit because the rent is so high and your salary compared to that is low. So that's one of the reasons why we've called to the government to lift the benefit caps that exist, lift the housing benefit caps that exist to support people like you. The second issue you raised is in relation to temporary accommodation that you're in. So one of the reasons why many councils across the country are going bankrupt is because huge increases in their bills of temporary accommodation, social care and children services. And that's why we're supporting councils to buy properties already built that they can use to rehouse families rather than using temporary accommodation to reduce their bills. The third point you raise in relation to the ultra-low emission zone is I'd encourage you to, we've now increased the scrappage scheme, so anybody in London, it used to be you had to earn below a certain level, but anybody is eligible now for the scrappage scheme. 41,000 people have taken advantage of the scrappage scheme. Many have bought new vehicles. And I'd encourage you to, after this call, go to the TfL website to see what you're entitled to in relation to your car, because that will reduce the pressures there are on you. The cost of living crisis is affecting many people across the country, including in London. I'm desperately sorry for the plight you're facing. The no-fault eviction that you were at the receiving end on is causing big problems across the country. We've said to the government they should end the Section 21 no-fault eviction. They should give tenants like you longer notice periods if you are being evicted, but you should only be evicted if there's a good reason for a landlord to evict you. Because what we're seeing, I'm afraid, is more and more London has been evicted through Section 21 when the government promised 3-4 years ago they would end that.
But you mentioned the scrappage scheme. If for the scrappage scheme they only give you £2,000, £2,000 is not going to buy me a ULEZ car.
ULEZ compliant. So with respect, it does.
I'm already paying. I've still got £3,000 left on the card that I have.
Yeah.
So I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I can't get a new car because I can't afford it.
Yeah. So just I say in a respectful way, you can get a ULEZ compliant car for the amount of money available in the scrappage scheme. I know this because many people have, but also we speak to those who show cars for sale. For those who've got finance, I mean, I'm afraid you need to speak to your finance company because different finance companies have different rules in relation to paying back the finance. What some people have chosen to do is to sell their vehicle because they get more money from that than they do from the scrappage scheme. But you can contact TfL, who will give you advice in relation to the scrappage scheme and the eligibility. And just to reassure you that there are vehicles available that are ULEZ compliant with the money the scrappage scheme gives.
But can I also ask, why is it that the government and the councils, waste money on housing people in temporary accommodation, especially people who can probably afford a mortgage but just don't have a deposit? Yeah. Why waste money on temporary accommodation for certain people? Why is it not means tested? Maybe it's better for the council to give certain people deposits knowing that they can get a mortgage.
Yeah, so,
and then they no longer become the council's problem.
I agree with you. That's one of the reasons I explained that the irony in relation to the benefits bill versus bricks and mortar. So there is a scheme which we do and which others do called the shared ownership scheme, which is part mortgage, part rent. So your deposit required is far less than it otherwise would be. So the normal deposit you need in London is circa £40,000, which very few people have, even if it's 5%. With shared ownership, the mortgage is far less. The average is £5,000, and now some mortgage companies are offering mortgages with a smaller deposit. You'll have heard, I'm sure, Rachel Reeves last week talking about fixed-term mortgages for 25 years to give people certainty, as they do in Europe, and that's one of the things that would help people like you, Sarah. But the irony is now the average cost to rent in London is £2,500. So if you were able to get on the property ladder, your mortgage, even with the increases caused by Liz Truss's kamikaze budget, would probably be less than the rent you pay in London and with a private landlord.
So what are we advising Sarah to do then in the context of all of the problems?
In relation to housing, Sarah, I mean, the key thing is to obviously speak to the council and see what help they can give you. Also, what we've done is we've provided financial support to CABs and to law centres. So it's worth just checking, Sarah, whether through a CAB and law centre that we help fund, whether you can maximise your income, because there may be benefits you're entitled to which you aren't receiving. Over the last couple of years, we've given lots of families in London additional income because of benefits they're entitled to they're not receiving. And the third thing, James, is to encourage Sarah to go to the TfL website to assist her, because what I don't want is her having to pay the ULEZ charge when she simply can't afford to do so.
So even if you ended up still owing money on the old car, you would be able to drive a car that didn't involve the ULEZ charge every day. That's what we're
So what happens? So what people have done in London, and those just outside London, is to sell off their vehicle, pay back their finance company, which is, and then they're not getting future, £12.50 a day, which is the ULEZ charge, or use a scrappage scheme, and with the money from the scrappage scheme, buy another vehicle that is ULEZ compliant. Some people haven't bought another vehicle; they've decided to.
It may not touch the sides of what you're going through at the moment, Sarah, but quite a lot of people getting in touch to say, Andrew in Richmond, but my 18-year-old car is worth next to nothing, but it is ULEZ compliant. I mean, quite a lot of people have been surprised to discover that their cars were not, particularly people in Uxbridge and Ruislip.
Just to remind colleagues that generally speaking, a petrol car that's newer than 2005 is ULEZ compliant. A diesel car that's newer than 2015 is ULEZ compliant. People think they've got to buy an electric car or a hybrid car or a new car. That's not the case.
Sarah, I wish we could do more.
Well, the thing is that I know he said about the shared ownership, but if I'm in perpetual debt, how am I supposed to save for a deposit for that? That's my thing. Mm. If I'm not getting extra money from elsewhere, how am I supposed to get myself out of this? Who am I supposed to go to? There's no government website that tells me that you can go to this if you've been denied universal credit. There's nothing like that.
Sarah, I mean, I'd encourage you to go to the Citizens Advice Bureau and law centres because we know they're desperately overworked and understaffed. We've given them resources over the last couple of years, and I announced in my budget this week we'll be giving those law centres an additional £4.2 million because they can help people who are really struggling, but also they can advise them and they can signpost them schemes and funding available to them, because you're right, it's a minefield in relation to seeing what benefits you're entitled to. I think the reality is for in the short term, it's very difficult to support people because of the lack of council homes. One of the reasons why I'm really passionate about council homes and genuinely affordable homes is because it allows people like you who aspire to be a homeowner to pay sub-market rents, so you can put money aside to save up for a deposit in the future, because you're living hand to mouth, because you've been paying a private rent, temporary accommodation. You simply can't put money aside each month to pay for a deposit. That's one of the reasons why actually council homes actually is a stepping stone towards the aspiration many people have to be homeowners.
So I wish you well. We'll keep in touch. You let us know how you get on with some of the organisations that the Mayor has suggested that you speak to, but do hang in there. Time for at least one more call.
Thank you very much, Sarah, for your call, and best of luck in the future. The next caller is from Tower Hill, and it's Alex. Good morning, Alex.
Hello, hi Sadiq. Hi, yeah, I run an organisation called Reform Political Advertising.
Yep.
We're a politically neutral, not-for-profit organisation campaigning for the House of Lords recommendation for there to be regulation for factual claims in electoral ads. And we launched a code for factual accuracy in electoral advertising this week. And I just wanted to ask you a straight yes or no question about it. The key point in the pledge that we're approaching parties and candidates in the mayoral election to support is that in your election advertising this year, you're going to make every reasonable effort not to mislead voters, ensure that factual claims are accurate according to recognised sources, and acknowledge if you make a mistake and issue a public correction as quickly as possible. The Green parties have already signed up to this. Will you sign up to it too?
This is Alex Tate, who was in the studio on Wednesday from Reform Political Advertising with a pretty straightforward question.
Well, Alex, I'm sure I'll ask my election agent to speak to you to see what we can do in relation to that. Can you go back in time to 2016 during the Brexit campaign? Because that bus was a lie, wasn't it?
Well, actually, there's disinformation across all of our elections. We've been tracking them, and we tracked the last mayoral election. It was particularly dirty, like we saw Sean Bailey sending, fake letters with a made-up City Hall logo for Londoners, and Brian Rose's antics. So it's a real opportunity
Alex,
to take some leadership.
Of course I'm sympathetic. I've been on the receiving end, as James knows, in elections, and you've just given another example of that. So of course I'm sympathetic to this. I probably get massive resignations from my election agent if I suggest on air, but of course we're sympathetic, and I'll make sure that my team speaks to you to make sure we can sign up to this. I mean, my only anxiety, just speaking candidly with you, as I've always been straight in relation to not just my election literature, but also as mayor in relation to what we are doing. We've got to have a level playing field, Alex, because what would be unfair is if I continue to be straight, candid and honest with Londoners, but my Tory opponent or others weren't. And so, of course, it's got to be right what you're saying. We've seen the consequence. James gave one example in relation to people's views on immigration, of misinformation. So, of course, we can have, factually accurate information. And by the way, sometimes we can make an error. Put your hands up and accept that an error has been made and correct that. And so, of course, I'm sympathetic, Alex. I'm going to encourage my election agent to speak to you as soon as this call is finished.
I'm going to keep an eye on this as well, because I don't quite buy that response. The idea that you can't commit to being honest in case...
I've said I'm sympathetic. No, I've said I'm sympathetic.
What you also said was you can't commit to it because the other lot might carry on lying. But two wrongs are never going to make a right, are they?
Hold on a sec, Alex. We've got to recognise that that the last two mayoral campaigns have seen the Tories fight dirty, misinformation, lies, and some would say racist and Islamophobic. Now, listen, I'm somebody who always has tried to fight campaigns that are Marquess of Queensberry, where my opponents, use Fight Club rules. What I'm saying to Alex is, of course, I'm sympathetic to what you're talking about. Of course, I try and have high standards. Of course, I try and have altitude. But I'm signposting Alex to my election agent in relation to pledges that have been signed up, because what happens is, you'll be aware, James, there'll be callers after callers between now and May the 2nd asking me to sign up to things. So yes, Alex, I'm sympathetic. And thank you, by the way, for the public service you're providing. And so I'll make sure my election agent speaks to you as soon as we finish this call.
And we will stay in touch with Alex and make sure that he does get a full and frank response. I think the Conservative candidate's on Monday, Alex. I don't know whether you'll be able to get on and perhaps put the same question to her, but she's on with Nick Ferrari on Monday morning.
Yeah. We ran it at the So we asked a similar question to candidates of the last mayoral election. And I think maybe we're a bit late with Sadiq, but the Liberal Democrats and the Greens signed up to it, as well as 7 candidates in total. We'll definitely speak to you.
No, thanks, Alex, and thank you.
Londoners would be quite disappointed if you can't commit to be factually accurate in your election ads. It's a very simple ask.
Yeah, no, thanks, Alex, and I'll make sure that my election agent speaks to you when we finish this call. I've only got time for another caller, haven't we?
One more.
Yeah, so the next caller is from... thanks, Alex. The next caller is from Loughton, and it's Tony. Good morning, Tony.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for taking my call. I've been a London cabbie now for 44 years, proud and distinguished, as you appreciate. I'm glad you mentioned the word high standards in your last comment. It comes to light this week that you was supporting a rally of non-speaking requirements for minicabs to be endorsed into the minicab industry, whether it's Uber or minicabs in general. Now, I want to know why, with respect to you, sir, is the fact that why have you done this? Fundamentally, it's the most important thing, language, from driver to passenger, to go from A to B. And you've now just, a stroke of a pen, suggested the £36 on the Cyril situation is going to be abolished. Now, with respect to you, sir, why have you done this? Because if anyone gets into a minicab and they want to go to, say, even Westminster Abbey, the driver might not even understand how to get there, let alone to speak English. Now, how can you make that decision, sir?
Well, Tony, thanks for your calls. Firstly, I've made no decision. What TfL are doing is reviewing the way they test people's competence to speak English, because what we've had examples of, TfL have, is examples of where people do speak very good English, but are not very good at doing tests. So what TfL are doing, and I support TfL, is reviewing the method of testing people to make sure it's fair. I'm sure you'd support that.
Listen, I mean, I understand the situation more than anyone else, being a London cabbie at the forefront for 44 years and seeing the political agenda that's gone on and the demise of the London black cab with the phasing out of the old TFX in them type of cabs. And then we've lost 3,000 drivers. And the situation now, you've took 3 years off a London cab that they shouldn't have been took off. And all these people now have gone from early retirement and when COVID was in.
What's the question, Tony, mate?
Well, it leads on to another question.
Well, we haven't got time for another question. What's the answer to the Seru English? No, I'm asking the mayor. So he says you've abolished the test. Has it been abolished?
No, TfL haven't abolished the test. TfL are reviewing the method of testing people's competence, because people can speak great English, Tony being a good example, and others, may not be good at doing tests. And so what TfL are doing is reviewing the way people are tested and their English and so forth. So
does that reassure you, Tony?
Mr. Mayor, is the £7,500...
No, just on the question that you've rung in on, does that address your question?
Well, it doesn't, with respect to you, James.
So you think the mayor is misleading me now?
It might be a vote winner. That's all I'm trying to say.
I don't understand. I really want to help you out here, because I don't understand. You've said it's been abolished. He says it hasn't been.
It hasn't. Well, all right. Well, in time will tell. Time will tell.
All right. Yeah. Well, mind how you go. 10:36 is the time, and that's that, I think, for another month. Well, what about the bridge in Hammersmith? I bloody hate motoring questions. I really do. But the bridge in Hammersmith is going to cost 250 million quid now. I saw a Tory councillor suggesting it should be named after you. By the way,
the cost of repairing Hammersmith Bridge is not new. So Hammersmith Bridge is a bridge owned by the council, Hampstead and Fulham. We know it's been closed to vehicles for a number of years. H&F have said quite clearly they can't afford to pay for the bridge to be repaired to a standard that allows vehicles to go over like buses. TfL don't own the asset and haven't got that sort of money either. The government are the only people that can afford to pay for the cost of that bill being repaired. Before the last mayoral election, the government said they would pay for that bridge to be repaired if the Tory won. The Tory didn't win, so they've withdrawn the offer to pay for that bridge being repaired. It's a classic example of a political stunt, and the government withholding cash for that bridge because the council is Labour and the mayor is Labour. I'd ask them to stop playing games with the residents in and around Hammersmith Bridge. Many of them desperately need to get across that bridge. We want buses to go across that bridge. And, the sooner they agree to pay for the cost of the bridge being repaired, the better.
And finally, an attack on a ULEZ camera and a set of traffic lights led to a child being injured in a car accident, police have said.
Yeah, look, I was notified about this yesterday. Can I be quite clear in relation to this issue? Look, the decision to expand the ULEZ was a difficult one for me to take, but it's the right one for me to make. I understand, though, there are people who oppose my policy of expanding the ULEZ. I think it's legitimate to protest, but the way to protest should be lawful, peaceful and safe. This is just one example of the consequences of those who are against the ULEZ breaking the law, because we've got a situation where a child has been injured as a consequence of actions from those who are anti-ULEZ. I'd encourage them to protest in a way that's lawful, peaceful and safe, because what we don't want is, God forbid, an injury that's even more serious.
Well, this has been directly linked by police to the destruction of.
Well, we had a few weeks ago.
What did you say to Ian Duncan Smith, who said he was happy for people to sabotage these cameras because they are, in his own words, facing an imposition that no one wants?
Well, I think for people like him to justify and explain the use of an improvised explosive device used last month to explain to this child and their family the consequence of their actions. And by the way, many of us rightly criticise when those who feel passionately about the environment, like Just Stop Oil and Extinction Rebellion, break the law. There should be some consistency. And I'd hope Mr. Ian Duncan Smith and those others who support these sorts of law breaking would also be consistent in relation to criticising, condemning and asking these people to stop this sort of law breaking. Many thanks. Pleasure always.
It is just coming up to 22:11. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Thomas Watt's up next with your headlines. 10:42 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I don't know. I just never know, all right, what the Toto rule is. That, when I talk about pulling back the curtain so that you can see what's going on in the studio. But I can tell you this. Getting the show back up and running after we've done a phone-in with the mayor is notoriously difficult. I've got a very powerful and moving guest to introduce you to shortly, but I currently have 90 seconds of airtime to fill. Luckily, Smear Keir, we can actually reveal. Should we run through the shortlist and then announce the winner? And this is proper. We've done it proper, like proper grown-ups with proper radio shows. We've counted all the votes. We've got an actual winner. It turned out that one of the entries was actually a professional sting maker for a rival radio station, which means that I can get rival radio stations to make me some production for free in their own time, but I can't get my own radio station, despite having the most popular programme on the entire station. I can't get my own radio station to make me a production in time to actually, before I forget about the feature that the production is designed to accompany. So should we run through the shortlist again? Or should we just announce the shortlist? Just watching the clock. 10:44 is the time. So this was it's Bob, Tim, Adrian, Aidan, Mo and Simon. We'll play them in order. This was Bob.
Smear Keir.
I think Bob came second. Did Bob come second? I think he was pretty close. Anyway, this was Tim.
Mr. Speaker, that's simply... Yeah, and I believe in velvet socialism. And I'll come to the Leader of the Opposition
of donkey fees. Smear Keir with James O'Brien.
That was brilliant, but a bit too long, I guess, the voters decided. It also sounded like Matt Green at the end, didn't it? The comedian Matt Green. I don't know who was doing the voice. Adrian?
Smear Keir.
That was good as well. I got quite a lot of votes. Number 11 was Aidan.
Smear Keir.
I like that too, punchy. 14 was Mo. Well, I liked all of them, actually.
Smear Keir, Smear Keir, Smear Keir.
That was my favourite. I can tell you now, because the voting is over. That was my favourite. And I do a little thing in the studio whenever it plays. I do a little jig, sort of, like a shushy thing. And finally, number 21, Simon.
Smear Keir.
Quite theatrical. And the winner is, miraculously, my favourite. I was certain we were going to come last. Number 14, Mo, is now the official Smear Keir jingle.
Smear Keir, Smear Keir, Smear Keir.
And I've got a Smear Keir for you in the next hour of the programme. 10:49 is the time. You've heard me on quite a few occasions, with regard to quite a few issues, describe them as being in that category where you don't know anything about a subject until suddenly you need to know everything. It's a sort of almost a case of being ambushed by life or by fate, by reality. I came up with it when we were talking about care homes, finding a care home for a family member. You know nothing about it. You might have heard radio phone-ins about it or read the odd article, but unless you actually need to find a bed for your mum, you don't know anything about it. And then suddenly you need to know everything. I read a story yesterday that is absolutely in the same category. Kerry Menai-Davis, who is with me in the studio, lost his little boy, Hugh, to a very, very rare form of cancer. But the reason I mention that phenomenon of not knowing anything until suddenly you need to know everything, well, it is because what you discovered, Kerry, in the starkest of circumstances, is that when you need to press pause on your life, on your livelihood, on everything, to care for a profoundly sick family member, in your case, I'm so sorry, your little boy, there's no help there at all.
No, and it's something that you'd think that would be there. And we talk about everyone helping the most vulnerable in the country. And when you're thrown into it, you could be just having a normal weekend and your child displays a symptom and you're thrown into all of a sudden being told that your child has cancer, as we were. And then to realise that actually one parent has to be a full-time caregiver, and it was Frances, my wife. And then I had to share work with looking after a sibling as well. You think, well, then you've got to worry about how you're going to pay your mortgage, how you're going to pay your bills. You're losing 50% of your income. And as I mentioned to you before we come on, if you're bringing a child into the world, you're covered with maternity and paternity. You can go back to your job. You can get allowances from the government. But if you have a chronically ill child or a terminally ill child, there seems to be a loophole where there is nothing available for those parents. And what we're doing is trying to create fill that void to make sure that they are supported.
It is extraordinary, and you factor in as well, of course, the need for treatment. And in Hugh's case, a 100-mile round trip, I think, that you and Francis would sort of share or alternate because you had to look after your
Yeah, well, we did it during the second lockdown. So Hugh was diagnosed in October half term, and in the space of 7 days, he went from sitting up, eating a jam donut in his bed to being on oxygen, receiving chemotherapy to save his life, basically. And you're thrown into it. You're given the cancer 101 immediately, and obviously your body, you're just in a different planet completely. And it's just. It's hard. When we were like ships in the night, 5 days on, 5 days off, we never saw each other and very isolated, and it was a bit obviously very traumatising at the time.
Yes, deeply lonely during the worst time of your life. The support of the person that you need.
I think even if a parent, we speak to parents now through the charity that are going through it now, and it's lonely for them now, but we obviously went through it during COVID where we couldn't see anyone, and which was completely isolating. And we were lucky in a sense that furlough was around and introduced by the government at that point. And so that's what we come up with, the idea of why they can introduce it then, and why can't we introduce it now to help those who have to go off work without any reason whatsoever apart from look after a sick child.
So it presented itself in a sense while you were suffering the problem. The solution presented itself. If you can do it for people who can't work as a COVID, can you please do it for people who can't work because of chronic illness?
And the model is already there.
Yes.
And then so there's two elements to it really. Those that are employed, the onus is put on the employer. There is no set parameters of what they should be doing, so they don't know what to do if a parent has to go off and look after their child. And also, if you're self-employed, there is nothing anyway.
Well, the same with COVID, wasn't it?
But you're also put into a position where if you're earning money, you can't claim universal credit. So there's means tested. So if you are having a job, you can't go off and then claim that. And
it's that loophole's the right word to use because no one wants it. This system doesn't make sense. No one's going to be going into bat to defend it, and no one has deliberately imposed it upon families like you. It's just that it's never really come to light before you.
No, exactly, and I think, and that's obviously the case when people do go through this. Sometimes they do grieve in silence and not want to go through it and fight it. And obviously, we found the loophole. And we speak to parents, countless amounts of parents that we've encountered on our charity, and we've even spoken to parents who've had to sell their homes, sell their clothes, make a choice between eating for themselves and feeding their child. And people just understand it's not just the fact that you're leaving work, it's the incurred cost of looking after a sick child. So in Hugh's case, he obviously had a rare form of cancer, and he had the most aggressive chemotherapy that you could have, which meant that his immune system was basically zero when you'd go home. And we did it during a pandemic, pre-vaccination, so we were very careful.
Crikey.
But also, you have to heat your home during the winter. The cost of living has made that a fortune for parents because a damp home means respiratory viruses, potentially. You have to completely sanitise your house all the time to prevent going into hospitals and these stays. And eating as well for parents. Like I'm 6 foot, 110 kilos. I like food. Not in a, well, it should be less of it. But
shouldn't we all, mate?
Yeah, but the Deliveroo fees, I was spending £2,000 on Deliveroo, I calculated, for 6 months.
Good Lord.
So it's just those added costs that aren't accounted for.
And you took the story to your MP. We spend a lot of time giving MPs a tough time on this programme. It's quite nice to come across one who has got it right.
Sir Oliver Heald, who's my MP for North and East Hertfordshire, do you know, they do get a bad rap, and I do listen to the radios, and everyone does give him a hard time sometimes, but you know, I will give Sir Oliver every credit that he has really gone out of his way to really help us. When I first spoke to him, he got me on a Zoom call within a week. This is just before Christmas, just about a month after Hugh died, and we went from discussing this, and we introduced me to the Health Minister, Edward Arger, and we went from stage to stage, and then we introduced this as a private members bill in June, and it didn't progress any further. And then on 6th of December, we went to Prime Minister's questions. I've got an interest in politics, and I said, I'd love to see it one day. And as I walked in, he said, I'm going to ask the Prime Minister a question today. I was like, wow. And then Rishi Sunak full-heartedly supported us, which he's done. My wife and I burst into tears in the gallery, as you can imagine. It's just emotions. And then so it's come to today where Sir Oliver introduced it as a private members bill, and fingers crossed, our second reading is today, and then this goes through to the committee stage.
And then hopefully becomes law.
Yeah, so what we're asking, I don't know the intricacies of Parliament, but I think we're asking in the initial stage a report from the Treasury on the merits of giving parents in our position, and lots of families, there's 4,000 children a year that are diagnosed and have to go in hospital for more than 2 months. We're asking for them to give us the merits of offering them a financial support system. And it's not just a credit that we're asking for. There is a lag which is not known until you're in it. So you can't claim disability living allowance till your child has been 3 months diagnosed, and then it can take 3 to 6 months to come in after that. So
That's
there's a
tough,
6 to 9 months lag between receiving anything, and that's including your blue badge, which you need to then pay for parking with.
Sure, some families can absorb that, many families can't.
And that's the stories that we hear all over the country.
What's the name of the charity, Kate?
It's Never You.
Why is it called It's Never You?
My wife, unfortunately, was the person that had to receive all the bad information on the 23rd of October. Because of COVID, she was the only one allowed into the hospital. I was allowed in there at 4 a.m. when they told us that, you know, Hugh had cancer. Yeah. And she turned around to me and said, you know, you always think it's someone else, it's never you. And there'll be someone listening to this today with thinking, God, those parents, I feel so sorry for them. And I hope to God it's not them. But, you know, I was the same. I'd listen to broadcasts and things, and read newspaper articles about childhood cancer, and we did everything we could for Hugh, and can't blame yourself or anything, but it's just one of those things that happened, and it's always someone else. It's never you, and that's why we called it. It's never you. You don't know what's around the corner. And
there's a shared determination here to ensure that some good comes out of your tragedy.
And Hugh's Law, which is it's known as in the media, and obviously it's got the terminology in the Parliament, but Hugh's Law, which is commonly known as, will give us a legacy for Hugh. And it's given me and my wife a purpose to carry on and create a legacy for him. And, you know, having the messages from this morning about parents just messaging us saying, do you know, this is so much needed. I've longed for someone like you to come along and push this. Well, thank you.
But I mean, on behalf of all of those parents, both the ones who have been through it, are going through it, and as you and Francis's words remind us, the ones who have no inkling whatsoever that actually they're going to. Because it'll happen today and tomorrow and the next day, won't it? The families, they'll be hit by these bombshells.
Well, I think it's 5 a day in the UK, children a day under the age of 14 that are diagnosed with cancer every day. And it's not just cancer patients, this is all children with chronic illnesses. So,
Tell me a bit about Hugh.
How would I describe him? Most courageous, brave child you'd ever meet. Most genuine, loving boy. On his 6th birthday, which was 18 days before he passed away, he didn't fancy his cake. He chose it and then didn't want it. And then, but he was starting to feel a bit unwell. But out of that, his little brother Rafe was a bit upset he didn't get a present. So Hugh gave him his birthday present. Said, "You can have it, Rafe, to play with." And all the way through Hugh's treatment, he was just like a beacon of strength. And for example, like when he first got diagnosed, they geared up for all the biopsies and having a Hickman line inserted. And, you know, as a parent, it's the worst thing you could ever witness, your child being put under for an operation and all these things, and it's just going so quickly. And they give you a little buzzer, so you know he's in recovery after he goes in. And I remember my wife Frances, she was the one who had the buzzer. I said I couldn't handle that for anxiety reasons. I said, so you take the buzzer. And anyway, he buzzed it. He came into recovery, and I remember sitting in the hospital room, just waiting for him. Is he going to be asleep? Is he going to be in pain? He walked in, sitting upright, eating a jam donut in bed. And I thought, right, if he's going to be like this, then that's the way we're going to be. And from that moment, Fran and I made a vow that we'd never shed a tear in front of him.
Right.
And we just said, like, if you're a 5-year-old in your bed, with wires and doctors point needles in you, what would you want? You'd want your mum and dad to be strong in front of you.
Yeah.
And that's what we've made a vow to do. And the age of him made him ignorant to it.
Sure.
And that was the beauty of what his age was, made him ignorant, and it helped us in a way. But he was just a complete, to coin the phrase, a legend. So
are you, actually, and your wife. How can people find out more about the work that you're doing, or indeed, if they need to, how can they get in touch with the charity?
Yeah, of course. So our website, itsneveryou.com, but also we're quite got a following on Instagram, it's.neveryou charity. But also part of the charities, I built the first children's cancer platform, like a social media app. So if parents are struggling with their child under cancer treatment, they can download our app on the platform on Apple and Android called the Children's Cancer Platform. And we have nearly 350 families using it now, talking to each other about how their experiences are going. And I think that's the greatest thing is creating a community where parents can share and support each other for mental health reasons. So
that's incredible, isn't it? Because the as we touched on, the loneliness, partly compounded in your case by COVID, but just to know that other people are going through what you're going through must be a great comfort.
It is. And also, doctors can only tell you so much, and nurses, and they're going home to a healthy family. And one of the things that I wanted to come off was Facebook, because my first world problem was someone else's nightmare at that time. And Google's full of misinformation. You can type "the world is flat" and it comes up with 20,000 pages. And I never wanted to get misinformation. So one of the things I wanted to do was create a safe space with correct information where parents can go on and know that everyone else around them have experienced the same problems. And that's, it's like being in the kitchen at the hospital where you're asking, what's the best shampoo for my child's bald head? I know that sounds gross, but what's my sensitive one? And what do you put on their NG plasters on their face to make sure it doesn't burn them? And that's the sort of conversation that you're thrown into.
Have you always been like this? Have you always been someone who looks
mad?
No. We're not talking about politics. Have you always been someone who tries to help others?
I would always say I've tried to, but since Hugh passed away, it's made my wife and I realise that, you get loads of requests for charities and stuff in the work that I'm in, and I always do like charity golf days. I'm always asked, and you kind of looked upon them like, oh God, here's another charity, and you think, but you don't realise actually what charities do until you're in that moment and how much they support you, because they do prop up every government service and public service, which is sad in a way, but charities are only formed really just because of someone's bad experience or the need to choose something. But I will say that since Hugh has passed away, it has given me a purpose to help others in that same position, because we went through hell. Other parents are going through hell. They don't need to go through hell because we can try and help them in a way. And there's many other charities like me out there that are doing this, and all because of they're grieving, or they find that themselves they need to change something. But yeah, it does give you an eye opener. I turned 40 last year, and I certainly didn't expect when I was 40 to have lost a son and to have a charity and to push a law through Parliament. So things turn quite quickly, as you know, and it's one of those things that you're just thrown into, but you have to react to it.
You honour Hugh's memory in a quite extraordinary fashion.
Thank you.
You really do. And off to the Commons after this?
Yeah, going straight after this now, yeah.
You're going to burst into tears again, aren't you?
I don't know if I can dance in the chamber, but I'll do something.
Kerry, thank you. Kerry Menai-Davis, whose charity It's Never You is doing, well, as you now know, doing absolutely extraordinary work. And you've won an awful lot of new admirers as well. Not that you care, or not that that's why you're here, but I can tell you that you have. Thank you, mate. And good luck. It's 11:03. It is 6 minutes after 11, and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. He was quite an impressive man, wasn't he, Kerry? You never know what sort of people are going to be like when you arrange to meet them. And I knew his work was incredible, but what a guy! Seriously, some people just they just impress you, don't they? And I can tell from my inbox that Kerry didn't just impress me. It is 7 minutes after 11. We turn our attention next to a story that I think we knew was coming. We didn't know it was coming on October the 7th when we reeled at the horror and the depravity of Hamas's attack on that music festival in southern Israel. And we didn't know it was coming a week or so later when it became fairly clear that Israel's response to that terror attack was going to be close to apocalyptic, that the destruction that they were going to wreak upon the Gaza Strip and the civilians who were going to die as a consequence would be counted not in the hundreds but in the thousands. I would say that probably by the beginning of November, particularly when we started educating each other on the pronouncements of some members of Benjamin Netanyahu's coalition in Israel, in the Israeli government, particularly when we began to see and hear some fairly chilling statements about nuclear bombs and the like from Israeli politicians. We, I think, by the beginning of November, had begun to fear that Netanyahu's plan did not involve any lip service even to a two-state solution. Then things went a bit odd because of some chants in protests on British streets about the river to the sea, coming from supporters of Palestinian people, a chant that is historically perceived as a call for the abolition of the modern state of Israel and indeed for the removal or expulsion or worse of all Jewish people in that territory. And that assumed, particularly for a certain type of right-wing commentator, that assumed a strange heft, that phrase, and our attempts to point out that Likud had campaigned on the same words not long ago. Benjamin Netanyahu's party had campaigned on the same words not long ago. Those fell in the context of the British media and the American media, but not, intriguingly, the rest of the world. Fell on largely deaf ears. And when I mention the rest of the world, I'm thinking of, among many other things, I'm thinking about a case brought by South Africa against Israel at the International Court of Justice that could conclude that Israel has been embarked upon genocidal conduct in that region. But we wait for that case to conclude. I'm comfortable with the phrase ethnic cleansing. I'm not comfortable with it. I hate it. But I'm comfortable that semantically and intellectually it describes what has happened there in the last few months. And now it's happened. The Israeli Prime Minister has stated that he rejects any notion whatsoever of a two-state solution to this crisis. He will reject any move to establish a Palestinian state when Israel ends its offensive against Gaza, and he has insisted that all territory west of the Jordan River would be under Israeli security control, which means Israel will be in charge from the river to the sea. And I don't know how some people process this. I really don't. And I mean good people. People who have, centuries of justification for supporting Israel's defense of itself and attacks upon its enemies. And yet who also clung throughout, and presumably still do, cling to the notion that a two-state solution is the only viable conclusion. If you're looking for a conclusion that doesn't perpetuate the carnage or the tension or the enmity, then there has to be a Palestinian homeland, as it were, a recognizable state. But Benjamin Netanyahu, as many of his critics have both predicted and expected, Benjamin Netanyahu has now essentially established his profound opposition to the establishment of a Palestinian state. And that won't surprise anyone who's watched things closely. There's been the occasional very, very lukewarm support for the idea, but he's nothing if not a political pragmatist. He's nothing if not a political opportunist, and he will say whatever gets him through the day in certain circumstances, not unlike Boris Johnson and others. And here is the conclusive proof of what has been the case for many years. That campaigning slogan that the Likud party has in its founding charter, I believe, states between the sea and the Jordan there will only be Israeli sovereignty. So, I mean, that bit I don't quite get, just as an observer of this conflict who has always sought to be honest. I think you can only be honest and fair. And if you count tragedy honestly, then you will feel the same about two deaths, regardless of the identity of the dead, particularly when we move into the context of children. And so many people, it seems to me, don't. So many people with the loudest contributions to make to this debate care more about a dead Palestinian child than they do about a dead Israeli child, or care more about a dead Israeli child, a dead Jewish child, than they do about a dead Palestinian child. And the hardest thing, and I'm not going to spend much time asking you to feel sorry for me on this subject, but the hardest thing about doing it fairly, without making it pretty clear that you have a side, that you have more support for the families of one dead child than you do for the families of another one. The hardest thing about doing that is that it upsets people. It upsets people who can't quite see. And I understand why you can't quite see, but it upsets people who can't quite see that that is the only position that an honest observer could or should adopt. I will not feel sorrier for a family burying a child because they are from that religion or that part of the world or this part of the world or that side of a border or this side of a border. So here we are. He has said it now. He has publicly and sharply rebutted American foreign policy. Biden has expended huge political capital supporting Israel. He has alienated a lot of people, as has Rishi Sunak. Public opinion, very different to government opinion on both sides of the Atlantic. When the numbers pass 10,000, 20,000 dead, with the fear, of course, that there will be many, many more as the rubble is cleared. Public opinion is a combination of outrage and bafflement. And throughout it all, people I like and respect who pay me the compliment of phoning my programme have all denied, have all believed that the destruction of the Gaza Strip and the replacement of what was there with Israeli rule was not on the table. I said to you some time ago, I said two things. I attended the Anne Frank Trust lunch yesterday, which is always one of the most moving dates in my calendar every single year. Michael Morpurgo gave the address, and I can't convey the power of his words. That's why he's one of the best storytellers the country has ever produced. But it was incredible. I sat next to a lovely man, a rabbi. We spoke honestly and frankly about some of these issues, and I can't conceive really of what it must be like to know now that the man in whom you put your faith, the man in whom you put your support was lying. That there was, in his mind, no desire for a peaceful solution, a two-state solution. There was a desire only for destruction. All the talk of eradicating Hamas and securing the release of the hostages was a camouflage, really, for the creation of Israeli rule from the river to the sea. I mean, it's such a moment that I can't quite believe it, particularly against the backdrop of political opportunists and dreadful provocateurs and professional dividers like Suella Braverman trying to criminalise almost the calling it hate marches when Palestinian supporters used language that the Prime Minister of Israel is now using on a podium. It's extraordinary. It's extraordinary. So, regardless of your position, although I think it's preferable that you have one, no, it's not, because I wouldn't be able to ring in then. If your position is, like mine, heartbreak and equanimity, then you are welcome to ring in as well. If, in other words, you don't have any family or historical skin in the game, for want of a better phrase, then how do you process this development? How do you process this news? Whether you thought it was coming, whether you knew it was coming or not, how do you deal with Benjamin Netanyahu's stated belief that Israel should be in power from the river Jordan to the sea? 0345 6060 973. I'll do a couple of texts just to set things up. This is from Leslie. Please, 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 can you stress throughout that this is not what the majority of Israeli people want, in the same way that the majority of British people don't want these flights to Rwanda. It's the Israeli government and not the Israeli people. My Israeli friends are as horrified by this as we are. I lived in Israel and saw firsthand how Jews and Arabs can live and work alongside each other beautifully. Netanyahu wants Trump back. They are peas in a pod. Lisa is a little less forgiving. Anyone who saw it any other way must be so naive. What is public opinion in Israel, says Sarah? And how can you possibly negotiate a two-state solution, this is from Lucy and Bushy, or anything else with the murdering barbarians in Gaza? These are Israel's neighbours who said they would repeat October the 7th atrocities again and again and again in capital letters. If you were Jewish, would you want these monsters living next door to you? No, of course I wouldn't. But, you know, neither would I want 12,000 children to be killed. Not even next door to me, in my own home. So, again, I understand your emotion, Lucy, but I don't know that I understand your thinking. Unless, of course, you have been in favour all along of the complete destruction of Gaza and the replacement of it with Israeli sovereignty from the river to the sea. And that's fine, as long as you've said so all along and didn't either pretend to believe or profess to believe or truly believe when supporters of the Israeli government were saying that this is about eradicating Hamas and getting the hostages free, and it's categorically not about conquering, if you like, or occupying or annexing or ruling over the Gaza Strip. You dismissed those fears and those criticisms. But now Benjamin Netanyahu has let you down. I said two things at the beginning of this. And I said them carefully because you have to be careful. The first thing I said is that be careful whose support you sign up. Because there are some people in the British political sphere and certainly in the British media who profess to be allies but are not at all. They might be motivated by Islamophobia or a hatred of Muslims rather than a love for Israel or a sympathy with Jewish people. And the second thing I said is that Netanyahu must not be allowed to become a representative for all supporters of Israel, because he will, I think, betray many of the people that support him when the contents of his soul emerge. And that's why I cited that book by Max Hastings when he quoted a young Benjamin Netanyahu as a biographer of Netanyahu's older brother, and Max Hastings quoted him as essentially being supportive of the idea of the eradication of Arab people. So here we are. I don't want any rows today, and I actually really don't. I know that might be a naive hope or a bit optimistic, but I just want to know how you are processing the latest development and the irrefutable fact that the Prime Minister of Israel believes that Israel not only believes that Israel should rule from the river to the sea, but also intends to make that happen. 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. It's 11:21. 24 minutes after 11 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Stephen Holloway says he's only saying that Israel should have security control, James. I think you might be over-egging it. I suppose I should say that I hope so. But it does, I'm afraid, signal an abandonment of any commitment to the idea of a two-state solution. There's no other way of looking at it than that, unless you want to add the words "for now" to the end of that sentence. And listen, Steve, I understand why you would want me to be over-egging it. I would want me to be over-egging it as well, because this is such a stark departure from the narrative that supporters of Israel, and I am a supporter of Israel, but I am not a supporter of what Israel has done latterly in the Gaza Strip. I'm not a supporter of lots of things that Israel has done. But, you know, the ease with which you can separate the two is enormous. It would be like saying that being a supporter of Britain means you have to be a supporter of Boris Johnson. It's an absurd suggestion, albeit one with rather less bloody consequences. And another tweet that I think speaks to a similar position, a similar hope. Netanyahu will be out of power by the end of the year. What he says doesn't matter. Well, that's clearly not true. He's the one that is deciding on the current course of action in Gaza and everywhere. He also didn't say Israeli rule from the river to the sea. He referred to security control. That is not the same thing. I'm happy to repeat that and acknowledge that is what some people believe. But it is an opinion, not a fact that you state. I think that describing this as an abandonment of any support for the establishment of a Palestinian state is a fact as opposed to an opinion. But as with everything, you are welcome to see it from another angle. Russell is in Golders Green. Russell, what would you like to say?
Oh, good morning, James. Hi.
Hello,
I think the main point that I wanted to make was similar to what you just read out of the tweet of someone saying that Netanyahu won't be in power by the end of the year. And I think that is definitely the case. And Israel is a democracy at the end of the day. And I think that the Israelis have seen the fact that he called himself Mr. Security.
Yes.
He's totally failed on that fact. The fact that there are still over 100 hostages being held by Hamas in Gaza. He's doing very little apart from, as you say, trying to destroy Hamas, but killing lots of Gazan civilians at the same time. A lot of Israelis are very uncomfortable about that. But I'd say the majority probably are. And equally within Israeli society, it's become very polarized as a nation. He won't. There'll be an election. I just read in the Jerusalem Post that that his emergency cabinet is close to collapse, and they've seen the damage and the Israelis have seen the damage that the extreme right wing, his cabinet ministers, have done throughout the rest of the country, to the country, and their actions in the West Bank as well. So whilst he's clinging to power at the moment, James. But I think I think it's on the verge of collapse. They might keep him on until they finish their campaign in Gaza, but after that, he's gone.
So he won't be the person. Ultimately, he won't be the person making the decision about what happens when the offensive is over. You're suggesting?
I don't think so. No.
But are you clutching at straws a bit? Are you, and I mean that in a nice way. Are you trying to move your own focus away from what he's said with regard to the two-state solution and sort of console yourself with the thought? Because people have been consoling themselves with the thought that Netanyahu won't be in power for much longer, for quite a long time, Russell.
No, I've looked at polls that say that he's very unpopular at the moment. The reason why he's clinging there, the reason why he's still in power, is because as soon as he finishes, he's in court. He's in criminal court.
So why do you think he's made this move then? Because it alienates or it embarrasses the White House. It embarrasses Joe Biden. It essentially, I would argue, it betrays many people who've spoken up in support of Israel's current campaign in Gaza, because it changes the parameters of motivation in a way. It changes the aim. And in the context of the rhetoric of river to sea, which is such a loaded phrase, as we've spent many weeks discussing, he doesn't really help anybody except presumably in his own mind himself. So why do you think he's done this at this point?
Simply because he wants to keep his right-wing cabinet on side.
Right. Okay. Sometimes we overcomplicate things, don't we? So short-term political advantage.
Absolutely, because he's trying to be the pivot, the man in the middle, basically, trying to keep the Israeli society. This is how I perceive it, James.
No, of course.
He tries to keep the general Israeli society on side, but at the same time, he knows that the only way he can stay in power is by keeping the, for want of a better word, largesse of his extreme right.
And it's a place.
Cabinet.
Just to go a little further, it's a place to which he can go because it probably does tally with his secret thoughts. Well, not even secret. It is not difficult to find support for the notion that Netanyahu has never been in favour of the establishment of a Palestinian state. So that would be the big picture. But the small picture would be the current state of his cabinet government, the current state of his precarious position, if you like, as Prime Minister, which is scant comfort to anybody counting the cost of this position, but is a valid explanation. Thank you, Russell. 11:31 is the time. If you want to join in, remember, you don't just get to challenge anything that I say, you can challenge anything that anybody else says. You know what to do. Thomas Watts is here now with your headlines. 25 minutes to 12 is the time. More than 24,600 Palestinians have been killed. 85% of the rather narrow coastal territory that makes up the Gaza Strip. 2.3 million people have fled their homes, and the United Nations says a quarter of the population is starving. In recent days, perhaps getting less news coverage than it did at the beginning of the mission, in recent days, a series of major raids launched by the Israeli military across much of the territory seen further intense fighting and bombardment in Gaza. And it was the Prime Minister Netanyahu who has talked of needing to be capable of saying no to our friends. So international voices calling for restraint, calling for ceasefire, which is most of the world, albeit not the UK and the USA, stating yesterday his opposition to the any establishment of a Palestinian state, therefore dismissing out of hand the prospect of what has become known as a two-state solution, and describing the need for Israel to maintain security control over all territories west of the Jordan River. And I just wonder how you process that, if part of your reluctant or uncomfortable support for the carnage in Gaza has been built upon the idea that it would, or it was, a path to a two-state solution. How do you deal with the fact that Netanyahu was probably lying to you? Michael's in Leicester. Michael, what would you like to say?
It's just really about the thing that every time we get these sorts of situations, people seem to be shocked, or at least they want to demonstrate that they're shocked by hearing something that, the likes of Netanyahu is saying. It could be somebody else in the political world, but this guy's been on the same mantra since 1996. The right wing of Israel got rid of Yitzhak Rabin in November of 1995, and by the summer of 96, Netanyahu was in charge. Netanyahu said publicly at that time, reported in the Israeli press and others, that he was going to destroy the Oslo Accord. And he did that immediately by settlements, by building new settlements. So he's had a track record. In 2019, famously, the Likud party meeting, where he once again demonstrated what he thought was the right way forward by funding Hamas. So Netanyahu deliberately allowed funds into Hamas for the simple reason that he wanted.
He thought that was the best way to. Yes, he thought that was the best way to push back against any move towards a two-state solution by seeing Hamas assume primacy over the PLO. You move further away because Hamas, like Netanyahu, remained committed to a single-state solution, as it were.
Yeah. I mean, you could argue that Hamas, stated that, but they didn't have the political or military capability to enforce that. So
no, but they had the express ambition. But I take your point. I take your point. I think people not.
They're going to have murderous individuals. Yeah.
I think people are shocked, if shock is the right word. Partly that he said the quiet bit out loud at this point in this way. Yeah. I think that particularly in the context of what the White House has done, it is notable. Both the timing and the tone is notable. And, of course, we must repeatedly make the point that I think your recollections of Netanyahu's interventions are accurate, but that does not represent Israeli public opinion. So, it becomes... Well, it doesn't, does it? There's plenty of people in Israel who want a two-state solution.
No. But it's incredible the way the press will put this. Like with Hamas, Obviously, the Palestinians have voted Hamas. Well, actually, they haven't, because their last election, most of these people in Palestine weren't even alive.
Yes, this is true.
So since 1996, who have the Israeli people voted for?
They voted in a way that has given Netanyahu a path to power. You're absolutely right. Yeah,
absolutely.
With increasingly desperate coalitions, but nonetheless, he is the one that's ended up at the head of them again and again and again.
I mean, and the vehicles of power are such that, yes, the majority of people probably don't agree, but unfortunately, the way it's all been set up by the political elite, particularly the right of the political elite, means that it's very difficult to get him out of power. And the fact that he's a criminal in his own right, and he's hanging on to power because if he doesn't, he's almost got the monopoly go straight to jail card. And that's where he deserves to be. But there are other people. I mean, Mark Regev, he goes on television. He was on radio last week. He lies. He distorts the truth almost to the opposite. Well, and then we have to share his righteous anger. It's wrong. He should be fact checked for every sentence, because he's actually him and
this is a spokesman for the Israeli Prime Minister. For people who don't know,
absolutely.
I mean, calling someone a liar, I suppose you're within your rights of freedom of speech, but obviously that's something that he would dispute.
Yeah, but he would tell some more lies in order to back that up. But
which is something else that he'd dispute. Let's not do this all day.
Yes, I know, but you see, if you go back through the history, you've only got to fact check him against what he said 2-3 weeks ago.
Well, that's true. That's true of, I mean, almost all political interviews in the current climate. Oh, yeah. But I take your point. The stakes here are much higher. I think I pick you up on the use of the word shock. I don't know that there is. I don't know that I'm finding shock. I'm certainly not expressing shock. I mean, I'm asking whether people are shocked, particularly people who have been supportive of this campaign thus far. But I think that in the British media, the people who've been chomping at the bit for protesters carrying banners calling for the Palestinian state, if you like, to run from the river to the sea, I think they process Benjamin Netanyahu calling for Israeli security control to run from the river to the sea by ignoring it, actually, not by being shocked by it. They just look the other way.
But they've looked the other way since 1996 when he started the settlement.
Yes, I agree with you. I'm challenging your use of the word shock. I don't think that there is a sense of shock. I think that there is. There's a sense of dismay among people who kind of knew it was coming, and a very disingenuous, if not dishonest, shrugging of shoulders and looking away from people who said that it wasn't.
Because then the next statement you have to look at is, well, he wants the river to the sea, so that's assuming he's talking about Jordan. But there's a part of the right wing that wants to look at the rivers as being the Euphrates to the Nile.
Well, there was an Israeli politician quite recently with a map, giving a speech next to a map of Greater Israel that dispensed with the Kingdom of Jordan.
Indeed.
So, what happens next then, briefly?
I think what needs to happen is the United Nations, the need to grow up there, and the Americans. Difficult because they've got the veto. The UK has got to lead, with a sense of honesty and not just being the poodle once again. We've got to gain that stature that we're supposed to have on the internet. I used to travel around the world as an engineer, and the people around the world used to hold us in great esteem because they thought we were honest chaps, and that was a fair thing to say. But with all of the things that have gone on, with all of the scandals that we've had, with the politicians and the scandal, look at the prime ministers that we've had. Yeah. Through all walks of life, we're not showing that, and you can see that then on the international stage. We're just not there. And you can see we're sitting on our hands, and you're going, well, come on, tell the truth. Just say something.
And that's why today's development is significant, even if, as you describe it, was very predictable or not shocking. It's significant because a lot of the political rhetoric on both sides of the Atlantic has been contingent upon a denial of what Netanyahu has now made obvious. It has been saying we want a two-state solution. We don't call for a ceasefire, but we do want a two-state solution. And now Netanyahu is saying, well, I don't. So what does that do to those supporters? That's where growing a pair would be helpful.
Indeed. And I mean, you've got to feel sorry for the actual Arab population within Israel itself, because they've been under the cosh. They almost troped out as, we are a democracy. Look, we've got these people in amongst the mix, yes, with the 3 different colour-coded ID cards, running a system of apartheid, but that's by the by, isn't it?
Well, it's not by. It's not. I mean, it's not by the by. It's not pertinent to the very specific conversation that we're having today, but it's certainly context. It's certainly relevant to the broader context. Thank you, Michael. Just to pick you up on a point there, James, says Sarah, the Palestinian chant from the river to the sea is not about having a state from the river to the sea. It's about Palestinian people having freedom from the river to the sea. Please correct. I normally ignore messages that contain stentorian statements like please correct, but I won't ignore yours, Sarah, because I'm such a nice chap. That might be your reading of the phrase, but there are plenty of people for whom the phrase means precisely the opposite of what you claim. It absolutely means an Arab state, if you like, from the river to the sea. And that is, of course, exactly what Hamas are dedicated to. And it was Hamas's actions on October the 7th that, of course, started this latest chapter of horror. So you please correct. It's 11:46. It is 11:49. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I suppose in the context of how the world deals with this, you have to turn some of your attention to the United Nations Supreme Court, where South Africa have brought a case against Israel at the International Court of Justice, accusing them of genocide. Benjamin Netanyahu inevitably and predictably has already made it clear that he won't pay any attention whatsoever to what the verdict may be. And you and I don't know yet whether or not the legal hurdle for genocide will be met. But by making this submission, there's a good piece by Nesreen Malik in The Guardian recently, by making this submission that recognises the seriousness of events and even the possibility that those events may amount to genocide, does rather highlight how bizarre and inadequate the international response has been, especially now that we know that Benjamin Netanyahu doesn't give a fig about the prospect of a two-state solution. Quite the opposite, in fact. He wants Israeli security control from the River Jordan all the way to the sea. And I asked today simply how you process this development, how you deal with this news. Let me just find you one. Here's one. If you're dealing with it by accusing me of anti-Semitism, as one texter here has done, then, I mean, you're wasting your time, really. And I'll read it to you just so you get an idea of what I have to deal with. Your twisted analysis of Netanyahu. I've also got one, actually, in the same thing, saying that you've been shilling for the Zionists since the beginning of this conflict. You should hang your head in shame. So I'm shilling for the Zionists, and I'm also anti-Semitic. It's a remarkably exhausting position to adopt, I have to tell you. Your twisted analysis of Netanyahu's motivation reveals your anti-Semitism. Palestinians repeatedly rejected the two-state solution, both through their PA leadership and Hamas. All Netanyahu has done is to finally and publicly acknowledge that fact. It's just bizarre, really, the way your brain has arrived at that conclusion, and put the rest of the world on notice that a repeat of October the 7th will never be allowed to happen again. What would you have him do if your kids were down those tunnels, James? Well, I wouldn't want him to kill 12,000 of your kids, is my answer to that question. And very simply, if you really are going to sort of stoop that low, the answer would be I would hope that the rescuing forces would behave as if the civilian children they encounter, as if their lives were just as valuable as the lives of the children that they were going to rescue. That's all. But you asked. I know that you don't expect sensible, compassionate, humanitarian answers to silly, loaded, horrible questions like that, but there it is. So you can't imagine what it would be like to think that the two lives, the life of the Israeli child and the life of the Palestinian child, were worth the same. You can't get your head around that. And because you can't get your head around that, you lash out and accuse me of anti-Semitism. So if a child I loved was being held in a territory where other children who I don't know live, I would hope that whoever was charged with rescuing my child respected the life of the other children who I don't know as much as they respected the life of my child. There's your answer, mate. Yeah. 11:53 is the time. Hussein's in Brighton. Hussein, what would you like to say?
Hi, good morning, James. I think you've got to look at the stated goals. This should be no surprise what Netanyahu said because of the stated goals of Zionism. And I know automatically that as soon as you say that word, it can shut down conversation, and it shouldn't because we're never going to get nowhere.
Well, it means so many different things to so many different people. That's why I find it unhelpful. I don't take this the wrong way, but I always think it's a bit sad when people use a word and then say, "Oh, I know that's going to get me into trouble." Do you know what I mean? So let's not do that again.
I'm going to borrow a metaphor from Rabbi Yaakov Shapiro, who's what he's saying is effectively Israel. It's got its hand stuck in the metaphoric cookie jar, and it's trying to get 3 particular cookies, which are stated objectives, if you like, which is that it wants Israel to be a country, it wants it to be a democracy, and it wants it to be a Jewish nation all at once. The problem is it can't have it all at once. If it wants to be a democracy, then you can't have, and I'm talking about now under a one-state solution, because that's where that's a stated now objective, from the river to the sea.
Not quite. I think there is a distinction, albeit not necessarily a profound one, between security control and sovereignty. Right. But it certainly takes a 2-state solution off the table.
Right. You can't have a democracy and then say we're a Jewish nation. So you can't have a country of Israel.
Because that runs the possibility of one day there being a plurality, a majority of non-Jewish people.
Exactly. This is the problem, what I'm saying.
It's got echoes of Northern Ireland, hasn't it?
Well, there has to be a compromise in the stated objectives. And if it was me, fine. One nation, one country, one state. It's a complete democracy, just in line with Western values, i.e., everyone is equal. Every human being is equal. Demilitarize the whole zone. But it will never happen. Why? Because there's geopolitical issues going on here where it serves countries' interests to keep the state of keep them in a perpetual state.
How does it?
I listen. It's happened. It's been over 75 years.
No, but whose interest does it serve? Because I don't know that it would. I mean, I don't know whether it would work or not.
If the US wanted to stop, if the US wanted to put their foot down, they could put their foot down tomorrow. All they've got to do is say no. It's as simple as that. There's UN resolution.
Yes, but why?
UN resolution.
I'm not badgering the witness. I'm just curious. What's your answer to the question of why it is? James, in other countries,
it's impossible to answer in 5 minutes. But you know that there's an extreme Zionist movement, and I'm not talking about Jewish Zionist movement.
No, I know, but you said it suits. No, stop. Let's just pick off one leaf at a time. Yeah. I just don't know that. I don't know that I can. Even in 5 hours, that I'd be able to explain why it is in the interests of other countries to sustain the status quo. The status quo sustains because a majority of people in Israel want it, and for an Israeli leader to say, right, we're tearing down the walls, we're opening the borders with Gaza and the West Bank, and you are all equal. That would be. That's why it doesn't happen, because it would be. It would be.
You can't have your cake. There's an old.
No, I know you keep saying that, but that's nothing to do with other countries in the world. That's because an Israeli government could never do that in the current climate.
No, but sorry. So why is it that Israel's allowed to have their cake? Because it's enabled. So okay, we talk about the Iron Dome. There's a political Iron Dome that everybody's aware of. Who provides the political Iron Dome over Israel?
Well, so America and the UK object to use their. Well, America in particular at the United Nations uses its veto to Israel's enormous and repeated advantage. But that's not in the interests of America. That's an ideological commitment to protecting the modern state of Israel as a Jewish state.
Where does that ideology come from? The ideology, as I said, it comes from different factions.
It doesn't really. It comes from the post-war settlement on the necessity for a country where Jewish people would be safe from persecution. That's where it comes from, and lots of people are committed to that. I'm committed to that. I think you're trying to cover too much territory, Hussein.
I know, it's impossible.
Well, I manage every day.
Have me by your side, James, and then I might give it a go. But in a few minutes to cover such a topic,
well, you don't just take off a little bit, bite off as much as you can chew at a time, because I think the problem really is on both sides, for want of a better word, people who don't want a two-state solution. And you're right. I mean, the only viable, one viable conclusion would be a single state in which everybody was equal. But then, as you point out, you couldn't then guarantee that would stay a Jewish state forever.
But it will be a place where people can live in harmony and peace eventually, but it has to be supported worldwide. So you have to... This is what I'm saying. People, or as soon as you say the word Zionism, people think of it as a dirty word. Look, if you don't address it head on, you've got to drop those stated aims. Just have a country, whoever's living there, let them live, let them prosper, get the arms out if you need to get the arms out.
But you're being quite naive, because...
Of course I am. It's a utopia.
No, well, it's not. No, but it's easy. I think it's easy for us to say that, because Jewish people were living in countries as equals, as economic and social equals before
thousands of years,
before the pogroms and before the Holocaust. So I don't know that. I don't know that it is.
So you've proved my point there, that Jews, in fact, you had indigenous Jews that were Arab. Right?
Yes.
So yeah, they did live together.
No, but but you know that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the unique nature of the post-Holocaust Israeli state, and you're not acknowledging that uniqueness. Now, I might be wrong. Maybe it doesn't deserve a unique status, but I believe it does. And your analysis doesn't believe that it does.
James.
Huh?
You can't have the stated goals of Zionism. Otherwise, this circle of violence will continue.
That may also be true. That may also be true. That may also be true. I mean, I don't think either of us would claim that we could solve this problem in a conversation. But I think that is where what's the phrase? The immovable force meets the whatever it is, where you have the stated goals, which are born of that unique post-Holocaust situation with the modern world, if you like, with the situation on the ground nearly 100 years later, or 80 years later, and that makes an impossibility of what you were saying. I think, albeit that it is utopian, we can agree on that. Thank you, Hussein. It's 12 noon. 4 minutes after 12 is the time. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. A change of pace next. And sometimes at 12 o'clock on a Friday, we like to dip our toes into gentler waters, don't we? And I think we'll do that today. Albeit that I do so with a nod towards the topic in the last hour, and indeed to the speech that I heard Michael Morpurgo give at the Anne Frank Trust lunch. If you don't know about the Anne Frank Trust, I'd urge you to find out more about their work. They're an extraordinary, unique organisation, essentially seeking to ensure, in the memory of Anne Frank, that future generations are freed from some of the prejudices that have blighted ours and others. And in fact, Michael Morpurgo picked up on that in yesterday's speech when he talked of the mess that we've made, being one that younger people who are children today, are going to have to try to fix. And you could be talking about almost any area of life, couldn't you, in that context? 5 minutes after 12 is the time. So, books and a coalition of authors, including some of the biggest names in children's fiction. Julia Donaldson, she of Stickman, and The Snail and the Whale, and The Gruffalo. Mallory Blackman, Noughts and Crosses, and plenty of other books, and of course Cressida Cowell, and plenty of others, backing a call by Book Trust to ensure that every child from a low-income family has access to books. Morpurgo told the Telegraph earlier this week that screens, of course, had replaced books as a child's escapism deliverer of choice. The instant gratification that they get from games or tablets and smartphones is sapping the attention span needed to read and appreciate literature. And I think he has a point. When you press a button on your phone, he said, or your iPad, you get immediate satisfaction from it, whereas a book... Do you know the weirdest thing that happened to me with regard to books was lockdown? And for reasons I've never fully been able to actually unravel, I hardly read a thing during lockdown. I was expecting to work my way through all of the books I'd never got around to reading, you know. I was finally going to finish Ulysses. I was going to get cracking on War and Peace. And I would have, you know, read lots of escapist, non-literary fiction as well. I'd cross continents for a brand new Harlan Coben or Jack Reacher book. Or my latest thing, as you know, the last 5 or 6 years or so is historical fiction. I'd love an Andrew Taylor book or an S.J. Paris or a C.J. Sampson, and I've discovered another one. This is a bit embarrassing, actually. I talked on air about how much I love historical fiction, particularly sort of 17th century stuff set around the time of Elizabeth and Mary, and that period when we were all setting fire to each other for being the wrong kind of Christian. And I mentioned this, and I got sent a book by a writer called S.W. Perry with a lovely note in it. I'm pretty sure I'm remembering this correctly, saying that I used to be a producer at LBC and I write historical fiction under this name. And for reasons I cannot recall, the book just sort of disappeared. It's sort of, you know what it, well, you probably don't because you don't get sent tons of books like I do, but I've got piles. And this one just disappeared to the bottom of a pile. And I was in Waterstones the other day looking for a new historical fiction to read because I've read every book written by the authors I've just mentioned and others who I may have temporarily forgotten. And Philip Kerr's good, yeah, but that's more modern. And I saw this and I picked it up and I read the blurb on the back of it, the first one in the series. I bought it, I read it, and about halfway through I thought, this is the guy. And I went and I found one of my piles. And I had a bit of a rummage, and there it was, the hardback. Much later in the series, he'd sent me the 4th book in the series. So my apologies to S.W. Perry, whoever you are. Your books are absolutely brilliant, and I'm now well into the 2nd in the series, and of course I've got the 4th or the 5th to look forward to because you gave it to me. You very kindly sent it to me. So my apologies for not picking up on that sooner. The reason I love historical fiction is that you have all of the joys of a page-turner, historical crime fiction in particular. You have all of the joys of a page-turner, but also with the added bonus of learning stuff. So I've just read 3 novellas featuring Giordano Bruno, which is S.J. Paris's ex-monk detective crossover, and learning an awful lot about the Spanish Inquisition in Italy and the oppression, if you like, of freedom of thought and all of that era and religious oppression and tensions in the Vatican. And I think I met Lucretia Borgia in it as well, although I don't think she was a Borgia by the time. There's all of that. I love it. And yet, when lockdown came around, I couldn't do it. I don't know why. It just didn't happen. I had that weird. This is what Michael Morpurgo is talking about. My attention span. Something happened to my attention span. I'd get out of bed much later than usual, stroll down the garden to the shed, do the show, and come back. So I had more time on my hands than I've had since college or since unemployment. And I did very, very, very little. Well, I did write a book, actually, to be fair. And then I did the terrible thing. I'll give you some advice, shall I, if you're ever thinking of becoming an author. Never publish a book when the bookshops are shut. It's a really strange experience to be published. That's why I've enjoyed the success of How They Broke Britain so much, because it's come out in normal circumstances. The last one, How Not to Be Wrong, came out about a day before the second lockdown, if memory serves. It's very dispiriting to have a book out when there's no bookshops. Very dispiriting. And in fact, talking of How They Broke Britain, it's 10 quid on Amazon today, which is practically half price. So if you haven't got yourself a copy of that yet, or you want to buy it for the Brexiter in your life, then get yourself on there. Albeit that I prefer you to support your local bookshops. I appreciate not everybody can afford to. So you're never going to get a better price than 10 quid for a brand spanking new hardback that's now enjoying its 11th week in the Amazon top 20. But I digress. There's quite a few of you picking up on my use of the word piles, including the producer. Simon in Montrose writes, I'm sorry to hear you have piles, James. I sometimes think that I may not be the most childish contributor to this radio programme. It might be you, in fact, or even Keith. But I digress. This is a really important story, and you can never convey the urgency of this because it is such a nebulous, malleable thing, the power of literature. It's you can't start shouting about it or screaming at people. You must read, but you can't hit people over the head. You can't argue them into picking up a book. You can't do it. It doesn't lend itself to that sort of tactic, you know. And yet it is arguably the single biggest gift you could give to a child from, and the children being targeted by this initiative are children from low-income families. I think it's one of the most valuable gifts you could give to any child. But for a variety of reasons, a child from a low-income family is now much less likely to have access to books and reading activities than a child from a higher income family. You can library. There was a beautiful thing on Twitter. I don't know if you saw it. I can't remember who it was even. I think it was a writer in a library, and there were 3 boys wandering around, 2 a little older, with probably the little brother of one of them, and the little brother couldn't quite believe what they'd just told him. And he said, "What, you mean you can take the books home?" He said, "You mean you can take the books home and you don't have to pay?" And I have a vague memory of that feeling in Kidderminster Library in about 1978, 1979. Mum must have realised that I loved reading. And when you first go to a library and you realise that if you've already got a love of books, you realise that every book in it, every story, all those kingdoms to discover, you can take them all home. I mean, you've got to bring them back. But you can it is actually magical, isn't it? And therefore something over which the Tories have presided over closures on unprecedented levels. But Michael Morpurgo has identified this division of opportunity between children with access to books, whose lives and education were massively enriched as a consequence, and those from deprived backgrounds that did not. Now, I've got a couple of challenges for you this hour. I would really like you to explain to somebody who doesn't believe Michael Morpurgo why he's right. Now, I don't know how you're going to do that. You could do it from a position of pompous intellectualism, but I've probably got that covered, certainly the pompous bit. Or you could do it from a position of personal perspective, which I think would be most powerful. So you, as a child of a low-income family, can explain how discovering literature, and these guys mean fiction. I appreciate that, you know, the first time you picked up an Andy McNab was the only time you read a book and all the way to the end. That's no criticism of anybody, by the way, least of all Andy McNab. But we're talking about children from low-income families, and the books that are going to open doors and windows they didn't know existed are going to be storybooks. And I want to know what happened to you, especially if you were from a poorer background. But for the rest of us, the challenge is this. For the rest of us, the challenge is this. Explain to somebody who doesn't understand what Michael Morpurgo means. He says, we do have a hugely divided society, particularly at the moment when we have so many millions living in poverty. And these are the very children who are exposed to this lack of commitment to passing on what is arguably the greatest asset we have in this country, our literature, from this remarkable language we have got. He goes further. These are also the most likely children to be suffering from mental health issues, from lack of self-worth, and from family problems at home. These are the very children who most need to find the pathway to fulfillment and achievement that books can bring. So, either using your personal example or your insights, just explain why books can save your life. 0345 6060 973. And explain to me, if you can, the difference that it has made to you. What would you be? And I don't think I need to apologise to people who don't read books. I don't want you to feel alienated, or people who don't read fiction. I don't want you. You don't feel alienated. You're not necessarily missing out on anything. But I can't imagine a life without books. And therefore, I want you to tell me the difference that they make. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. Especially if you were from a poorer background, if you are one of the children, I beg your pardon, if you were one of the children that Michael Morpurgo is talking about, can you describe the difference that books made to you? And of course, the more you read, the better you'll be at describing things. That's one of the bonuses, isn't it? That's one of the details. The number you need, as always, is 0345 6060 973. Because it's so important. Do you know that Dolly Parton is personally responsible for ensuring, is it every child in America, I think, or a huge numbers of children in America just get sent a book? One book. So what an amazing charity. What an amazing woman. I'd love to have her on Full Disclosure. Do you know, I got the weirdest phone call once on a Saturday from a mate who was with Dolly Parton's manager, and they'd heard the show in the car from Heathrow or something like that and the previous day, and wanted to invite me to her concert that night. And I was in Norfolk. I was miles away. I was kicking myself. I'd have loved to. It would have been magical, wouldn't it? But she has done that. When I hang up my headphones, if I do find a cause to which I can dedicate myself, and I'll be still badgering you for help and support, I can guarantee you, I can't think of anything that I might be better at than trying to get more books to more children who haven't got books in the first place. So, go on. 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. What difference did it make to you? And how can you explain that to a cynic? I don't mean a bad person. I just mean a sceptical one. Oh, whatever. No, it doesn't. What's old Morpurgo banging on about now? But you know what he's banging on about. You know the difference it can make. Can you describe it? 22 after 12 is the time, and I look, I'm very middle class. You know that, all right? And I mention it because if I don't, you give me a hard time for not mentioning it, and when I mention it, you give me a hard time for mentioning it. But I take a view. I don't know why I know the obvious answers to the questions of why children from poorer backgrounds are less likely to have access to books, but I don't know what difference, how different it feels to have those kingdoms of the imagination thrown open by books when you're from a poorer background. And I want you to tell me. Steve's in Louth in Lincolnshire to kick things off. Steve, what would you like to say?
Good afternoon, James.
Hello,
my name's Steve. I'm from Louth, actually, in Lincolnshire.
Louth. I said Louth. I'm a silly old sauce. Sorry, mate. I even knew that one, actually, but I don't know why. Yeah. Anyway.
Next time I see you in North Berwick, I'll be pointing that out. It's Louth.
Quite right, too. Quite right, too.
Yeah. So when I was a kid, I was born in the 50s, and we had nothing, nothing. I mean, nothing. Church mice used to come round and help us out. And,
Go on, get on with it. A fork in the sugar bowl.
Yeah, yes. And no, we didn't have no sugar. And my mother was, we didn't have anything. My dad was unable to work, lots of stuff like that. And a guy came around selling nice encyclopedias. I had 6 brothers and sisters. My mum and dad were okay at that. And this guy came round and sold this encyclopedia set. And my mother, I don't think, ever paid for it. Mm. But as a 5-year-old, I gathered these books were just, A, they were a possession. They were so tactile. Yeah. But B, I got into reading them. And the stories of, it was Janet and John understand the weather. Janet and John understand loads. Janet and John, go on a trip. Janet and John go on a train. And all of a sudden, I was able to get into a world that I never, ever inhabited. Like we never went on holidays, so we never went on trains or buses. It was rough, Yes. But, there was always... And that, like the escapism, allowed me to get to a different place, allowed me to start thinking that there was a different world out there, allowed me to understand that there were people out there who didn't inhabit the world that I did. Yes. With some quite violent opportunity, violent stuff as well, which is, blah, blah, blah. But... Sure. I just think it opened up an avenue that I didn't know existed. It opened up opportunity. And I went to school. I was brilliant at school, got my 11 plus, and then just got fed up with school. Left when I was 14, got a job. I now have a bachelor's degree. I have a master's degree. I was at Sellafield plant for 3.5 years and ran part of that. And you know, I've moved on, and it was only through books.
So I don't think either of us can answer this question. But who would we be if we hadn't had them?
I don't know. It's a really good question. I mean,
well, it's not, is it? It's a rubbish question because neither of us can answer it. But it's a good, in the sense that it makes you think. It's a good question.
Yeah, I don't know. And we've often talked about nature and nurture in our family because my siblings are not in the position that I'm in. I mean, I married somebody really good. That helped me tremendously, and that encouraged me. And the other thing was, I had 4 children, and I absolutely made sure all those children got the best education that they could.
Yeah.
You know, so for me, that was really powerful. It taught you huge lessons. Where would you be without it? I don't know. But you know, I just think it was
put it in a sentence.
Powerful.
I think you've already done it, actually, Steve. It makes you aware of worlds beyond your window, doesn't it? It made you realise that.
Yeah, there was something else out there, and I wanted to travel and see exotic things. I went on a trip. This is going to sound really strange. I went on a trip in 2016 on the Murray River in Australia for 5 days, a bird watching thing, because I'd seen it in the book.
Oh, how magical!
When I was 5.
How magical! What was it? It wasn't the Children's Encyclopedia.
No, it was. I can't remember it wasn't Encyclopedia Britannica, but it was a whole range of things. And the thing is, here I am 65 years later, and I still have 2 of them.
That's magic, isn't it? I think we've got. We had the Children's Encyclopedia by a bloke I always remember called Arthur Mee, M-E-E. I bet it's in the attic at Mum's, and I had a very similar experience to you, actually, albeit that there were plenty of books in my house, and times were not hard. They did, I mean, not fiction, but written like stories. So teaching you stuff through narrative, if you like, but not fiction. God, what a lovely call. Thank you, mate. Luth. I must remember that. And also, I must get back to North Berwick this summer. I didn't make it this year. Last year. Lee's in Carshalton. Lee, what would you like to say?
Yeah, hello, James.
Hello, mate.
First time caller.
Welcome aboard.
Hiya. Yeah, I was just ringing up because, about 18 months ago, I gave up drinking, and one of the main things that got me through it has been reading books. In the evening, I just can't wait to sit down and read.
Oh, wow.
So it just, I used to drink so much all the time. And I did used to read a bit, but I thought, and when I gave up drinking, I gave up through reading a book about drinking.
Did you?
Yes, I read a book about it, and I thought, oh my God. I thought I'm going to stop this, and I sort of thought, right, I'm going to start reading more and more, and it's just been a life changer for me, really, because I just love reading now.
I suppose if you were drinking to escape a bit,
probably.
Then the books have stepped into that space.
Yes, and it gives me something to. My wife, I can't wait to go to bed at night and read. I'm like, we're going to go to bed now, so I can read my book.
when you've got a really good one on the go, there's nothing like it, is there? There's no. You can't. I can't. Just one more chapter before I turn the lights off.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and also, I like C.J. Sampson and stuff like that. Historical fictions. And
check out. Have you read the S.J. Paris ones or the S.W. Perry ones?
I've just got one actually, and I haven't started reading it yet because I'm just finishing off a book. But
you'll enjoy that.
Yeah, I've just actually got that to start reading when I finish the one I've got now.
It's
been good for me.
And that's not childhood. But that's in adulthood for someone who did read. But you found a whole new gear since you gave up the booze.
Yeah.
I bet you're healthier for it as well, aren't you?
Definitely, yeah.
I love that, Lee. Thank you, mate.
Cheers, James.
Did you say again?
So I said cheers, James.
Mind how you go. It just faded in my ear then. 29 minutes after 12 is the time. In fact, it does exist in Britain, Dolly Parton's Imagination Library. They've already mailed 5 million posted. They've mailed 5 million books to children in the UK, and the system is up and running. She launched it in 2007. It's a book gifting program, more Americanese. It's a book gifting program devoted to inspiring a love of reading in the hearts of children everywhere. So it is exactly what I say. The support books of appropriate high quality are sent to children every month from birth until the month they turn 5. I don't know any more about it except that, but I do know now that it is operating in the UK as well. 12:30, Amelia Cox has your headlines. 33 minutes after 12 is the time. It's Dolly Parton's birthday today, would you believe? Her 78th birthday. So, highly unlikely event that anybody listening to this is going to be bumping into her later to make sure she knows that we were lavishing love upon her on the programme. Michael Morpurgo, other authors, passionate about the importance of getting books into the lives of children from poorer backgrounds, from low-income families. And I think we've done a pretty good job so far of explaining why it is important, because not everybody gets it. Not everybody gets it. And it is the greatest gift you can give someone. And however old you are, I'll read this. It's Hi, James. It's anonymous here. I just wanted to say that in all my 52 years, I've never read a book from cover to cover. I've read books, or tried to read books, but I've never finished them. My imagination would finish the book in the way that I wanted. I even managed to get through school doing the same. You're the first person that I've ever told this to. I've had a successful career and business life, but I now feel like I've missed out on so much. I've never felt this until your phone in today, but I don't feel the urge to read a book. No, it's not for everybody. I mean, to be honest, if you're finishing the books yourself in your head, then you've got it. The imagination is there. It's like you know how your outer life needs nourishing. Like you need food and you need stimulation. You need sunlight and oxygen and water. I think your inner life needs nourishing as well, and it doesn't necessarily all come from books. Some of the RPG games, some of the big video games, they are like interactive fiction, aren't they? That is as if you are playing a character in a story, and they are written incredibly well. I think Alex Garland worked on video games as well as films. The guy that wrote The Beach and wrote the script for 28 Days Later, he moved into video. So some brilliant writers and artists working on video games. But I guess the pictures are better. I like to say pictures are better on the radio because you use your imagination to create them. And I think when you're reading a book, there'd be moments, haven't there, with books where 5 years later you can't remember whether you read it or saw it. And then you work it out and you realise, well, you know you couldn't have seen it because it's never been filmed. But in your head, you're sure you saw it. I used to get that a bit when I was younger, not so much now. 12:36 is the time. Ashling's in Surbiton. Aishling, what would you like to say?
Oh, hello. Sorry, I'm really nervous. First-time caller.
It's only me.
Very long time.
It's only me.
You always say that, but we know that's not true.
No, it is definitely only me, but it's not necessarily a guarantee that you don't need anything to be nervous about. Carry on.
I just wanted to call in because I was listening to this particular subject, and it really sort of resonates with me. I grew up in my parents were probably working class, but they were aspirational, and we grew up in a middle class area. Yeah. But we didn't have a lot of money, but I did have access to books, and they were always like the most important thing in my world. And we were quite a dysfunctional family, right. So it wasn't the worst thing you can imagine, but it was not great.
Okay.
And so looking back now, I realise that books basically kind of brought me up. That the books I was reading sort of helped me understand how to be a person and how families should work, how society should work, what was kind of not missing in where I was.
Is that your animal?
Yeah, sorry.
No, that's lovely. I'm just checking. I just wanted to make sure you weren't under attack.
No, I'm not under attack.
How lovely. That's I'd never thought of it like that, actually, because I'm thinking about escapism reading books. You're, in a sense, describing learning how the world should be.
Yeah. Yeah, and
it's different.
think escapism was a huge part as well.
Sure.
And I did live in my books, and it was my way of retreating to a safe place. But, I didn't really get the sort of, I felt, looking back, we didn't really get the kind of upbringing that we needed. We weren't set up to be out in the world, and books gave that to me. They sort of brought me up, basically. They socialised me, and and gave me hope for what what could
beautiful.
actually be.
But particular books you can cite as having made you the woman that you are today, actually.
It's hard to kind of think of them as being particularly special, but things like Little House on the Prairie or What Casey Did or Children from One End Street, I think, was a favourite of mine. The Kids from One End Street or something.
I don't know that one.
I can't remember the name of the writer.
The Little House on the Prairie is, we should probably make a list one day of the truly seminal books that people read as children. That touches so many people forever, doesn't it?
Yeah. And Little Women and things like that. And I know they're kind of sentimental books in a way.
Sure.
They're of their time. But,
But you need sentiment when you're little. It's like a warm blanket
do.
being wrapped around you, isn't it? Some of those stories that are like that.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely.
I love that. You're not sounding nervous now.
Okay, good.
Have a lovely weekend. Thank you, Ashley. It's 12:39. This is nice. I love it when this happens. The power of radio. I think the books that your last caller spoke of, that would be Stephen Luth, definitely not Louth, were called The New Book of Knowledge, James. I'm pretty sure my mum bought them from a salesman at the door and paid weekly. My brother and I frequently consulted them throughout school, and they came with me when I left home over 50 years ago. I still have the set. That's nice. And speaking of Andy McNabb, he's written a brilliant series of books, Pete tells me, called Boy Soldier, for 9 to 13-year-old boys. They're an excellent read for youngsters. So it's Hugh, sorry. Sarah's in Sevenoaks. Sarah, what would you like to say?
Can I just say this is such an interesting and exciting topic for me, so thank you so much. I'm trying to study and I keep getting distracted by you. So.
Well, you can't blame me if your essays are late.
Oh, no, it's not an essay, it's a PhD. So
okay. Well, you definitely can't blame me then. Go on.
Okay. First of all, I grew up in the middle-class area, but poor. So for me, going to my local library in Sevenoaks, that some of the most magical memories for me as a kid. We didn't have a lot, but that was it. And I still go there to this day. And every time I go in, I go, I used to come here as a kid. It's brilliant.
Why? Why? What difference did it make? What did it do?
It gave me a sense of community. And
how do you mean? How can you get a sense of community from having your head in a book?
What, by going to a library and realise there's other people there who are just as fascinated by books as you?
And did you do things there? Because I remember a storytelling group now at Kidderminster Library that I'd forgotten about, that you'd go to after school and someone would just read you a story, which is, Mum and Dad read us stories as well, but that just took it to a new dimension.
Well, not as a child, but as an adult, I went to a local reading group for mental health for people who were struggling.
What a great idea.
And that's had a great effect on me. And that got me back into reading, and now I'm a complete book nerd. I've got so many books, it's ridiculous. I also find, I understand that you talk about literature a lot, but I find reading biographies, especially of celebrities and their mental health, has helped me to accept who I am, accept my struggles, and become a stronger person for it as well.
But you feel seen. You feel seen. I
feel seen and understood, and that's I don't get that in society. I'm an introvert, and I find it a bit tricky to navigate my world. With ADHD and dyslexia.
Yes, of course.
But I also think you can get that from literature as well. People say write about what you know, and a lot of people who write literature put their own aspects of life into it, so you can learn from both. It's so powerful, James.
You're very true. I didn't mean to be snobbish about non-fiction. Crikey, I've been plugging my own non-fiction book since November the 2nd of last year. But I think for children, the world's outside your window. Well, probably not even that, actually, Sarah, now you come to mention it. You could probably be reading a story as a child about someone you really admire, or about Anne Frank's diary, I suppose. Or it doesn't have to be fiction at all, does it?
It's absolutely amazing. And there's a lot more books about diversity now, people who are neurodivergent, and I think that would have helped me so much as a kid.
Well, have you read?
I really do.
Have you heard of Percy Jackson?
Yes.
You know that Rick Riordan's huge series actually takes neurodivergence as a starting point for superpowers. So it's all about Mount Olympus and Zeus and the gods, but the kids in the modern world who have the links with the ancients are neurodiverse, and it's as if that, because you are related to because you are an immortal and you're related to a god, it presents in the modern world as being neurodiverse. It's an incredible conceit for an author to have introduced. It's exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. So books are amazing.
And here you are doing a PhD. So something stuck.
Well, exactly. I've just been reading about feminist disability studies while listening to your show. So
I think most people do, Sarah.
Normal.
Yes, it's probably the most popular topic of I wish you well. PhDs are tough, man, but you know that already. 12:44 is the time. Kathy's in Bermondsey. Kathy, what would you like to say?
Hi, the Dolly Parton Library. Go online. It will come up. Put in your postcode, and if you're under that scheme, you just register the child and address.
It's great, isn't it?
That's it. That is all. I mean, my grandson, he loved his books.
You signed him up for it, did you?
Yes, and now I have to supply him every month with another book.
Quite right, too. That's what grandmas are for.
But just the difference it made to my life. I was a street child, one of those. Yeah, never got home, and was out all night, that type of thing.
Oh, okay.
And
crikey.
My father was illiterate, and it was an interesting childhood. But I used to go to the library to keep warm.
Yeah.
You had to stamp your feet to make sure the rats weren't running around to get in there. Bermondsey's changed.
Yes, it certainly has. It's been gentrified, don't you know?
Oh, isn't it just? But that library, I mean, it was pure, just completely absorbed me. And then I was saying to your researcher, producer, whatever, that
I like whatever. Well, can we introduce that now? Moving forward, can everyone say, I was talking to your whatever?
Well, this is where reading comes in that useful,
well, that's very
true.
true.
All these words.
Yes, exactly. A dizzying array. Go on.
What happened is that was through childhood. I then got married. When I was getting divorced, it was very, very stressful. I retreated again into my books.
Oh, really?
But now I'm retired and I love my life. I've got Audible on all the time, or LBC. So I'm still. I've listened to yours. It's amazing.
Oh, you're very kind. Thank you, Kathy. You can come again. It's all right. It doesn't exactly cheer you up, though, does it?
No, but it puts it all, because I'm also dyslexic. So it puts it in order for me.
Ah, yeah.
So I'm listening to that while I'm sewing, and although I'm not sitting and reading, I've got it going in my head all the time, and reading to my children. I mean, I taught for 35 years, and I would have magazines, I would have comics, newspapers. I didn't care what they read. I just wanted them to read.
And it worked?
It certainly did. I used to read stories to my kids when they went to bed. My son didn't like stories, so I used to read him wrestling magazines.
Yeah, I think
really?
you find what you like, don't you? There's no point trying to prescribe. You help. The biggest gift you can give a child is helping them find the stuff they like to read.
Absolutely, yeah. I wasn't, as a teacher, they didn't like it because it's like, no, this is what we're reading this week. And it's like, well, it's not listening.
He's not going to read that. He's not going to read that. And Audible's gone bonkers in the last few years. So it's, loads of people prefer their books now in audio format. I don't think there's any downside to that, is there? You can rewind. It's like Global Player. You can rewind it and pause it and pick it up again and go back.
And you can do things while it's going on.
Yes.
You can sew, you can cook, you can do whatever.
I got on the rowing machine. I used to get on the rowing machine during lockdown because I get so bored doing exercise. I need to get back into that, actually. I need to. There you go. You've inspired me.
Yeah, as well.
When were you last on it? When were you last on it?
I just moved it when I hoovered.
Have a lovely day, Kathy. Well, that'll do. That counts, doesn't it? That's weightlifting. It's 12:47. It's 12:51. I knit it all together now in quite a spectacular fashion, because the power of radio, which I've mentioned this morning, the importance of books, and you're about to hear from someone who has written a book, and indeed the growing popularity of podcasts that, in a sense, straddle the space between books and radio, don't they? In a way, in a sense. So the guest on Full Disclosure this week is a journalist called Nick Wallace, who you've probably heard of. If you haven't, you have. because he is the journalist who has arguably, but I think I would win that argument, done more than any other to propel the post office scandal to the prominence that it finally achieved at the beginning of this year. Indeed, he worked on the drama, Mr. Bates versus the Post Office. And back in the day, he took the story to Richard Brooks at Private Eye. Richard joined us, of course, a couple of weeks ago to talk through the early days of that. But what I didn't know until I met Nick earlier this week was how his interest in the story had actually begun, because he is one of those people like me who loves radio and has worked in radio and will hopefully work in radio again. And it was when he was presenting a show on a radio station that he got a text. And from that little acorn, the whole oak tree of the Horizon scandal, the post office scandal, the ITV drama, the continuing political uproar, and of course the almost countless human tragedies that have unfolded. It was from that tiny acorn of a text to his radio show that the whole thing grew, which certainly gave me pause. I thought of the occasions when you've sent me a text that says something like, James, I've got something really important for you to look into, and I've not explored it. Maybe I've missed several scoops over the years. It seems possible, but thankfully Nick was built of rather better journalistic clout than I am, and he tells a little bit of the story here.
I was actively looking for stories all the time at BBC Surrey. That's what Newsbeat had taught me. Go and look for where the stories are, and you can't just expect them to come to you. And I got a text from a company called Surrey Cars asking if they could bid for the BBC Surrey taxi account. Now, of course, I immediately chuckled as soon as I saw it, because the idea that we'd have a budget for a taxi account made me laugh. And if we did, I would have forwarded the tweet on to management and thought no more about it. So I was on air doing the breakfast show, and the tweet came in. And because you tend to be slightly adrenalised when you're doing a show, and I think I might have said, instead of just saying I'm sorry we don't have a taxi account, I said something like, oh, well, that depends whether your drivers will come on air and tell us some of their amazing stories, or words to that effect. And I got a tweet back saying, oh, I've got a story to tell you, all right, call me after the show. There was just something about the tone of it. And I thought, well, okay, he's offering me a story. Great, I will call him after the show. I'm not doing anything else. So we private message, followed each other, private message, swapped numbers. After the show, I gave this person a call. And Surrey Cars was one man. It was Devinder Misra.
Right.
Who was the wife of Seema Misra, who was the formerly was the West Byfleet postmistress. And he told me that his pregnant partner had been thrown in prison for a crime she didn't commit, and I was agog. But I was and he, his story. You push him, you ask questions, you ask all the right questions you should. And we were on the phone for 40 minutes, and he was erratic but lucid. He was all over the place. You could tell he was traumatized. Yeah. He was not someone who I thought was spinning me a yarn. But the best thing for me about this was that he referred me to the 2009 Computer Weekly investigation, which was already in the public domain. Yes. And he told me there was an organisation called the Justice for Sub-Postmasters Alliance, run by one Alan Bates. So within an hour of putting the phone down to Devinder, I was speaking to Alan Bates, who told me, oh yeah, there are loads of people out there who've had exactly or a similar experience to what Devinder and Seema had gone through.
And you'd never done a job like this before? You'd never...
No. No. I'd never done an investigation.
Never gone deep?
No.
And I love the way that cuts off there, because you want to hear more, don't you? And you can. You can download Full Disclosure at Global Player or indeed wherever you get your podcasts. And it's a perfect accompaniment or companion piece to the drama, actually. And Nick's book, The Great Post Office Scandal, steers us effortlessly back to the conversation that we've been having since 12 o'clock, which is about Michael Morpurgo's call to arms. And as I say, I saw him speaking yesterday, and I'm not embarrassed to tell you that I shed a little tear on at least two occasions. Once when he did, actually, he was commemorating or remembering a teacher he'd had, a classics teacher he'd had at school, who had fled the Nazis and ended up here, and gave all of the people that contributed to Michael Morpurgo's lifelong love of books, I think, explain why he is so dedicated and passionate about ensuring that other children, in this case children from lower income backgrounds, have the same access. And we've just been chronicling, if you don't like me and you're just tuning in to listen to Sheila, I'll just tell you that we've been chronicling the difference that books can make in your life, particularly if you're having a tough childhood. You may not even realise it's a tough childhood. Kim's in Hampstead. Kim, what would you like to say?
Hello, James.
Hello, Kim.
I've spoken to you before. I listen to you every morning.
Thank you. Quite right, too. Should be compulsory.
Absolutely. So basically, I spent a lot of my childhood in hospital from the age of 2 up until 13, in and out. Different operations for my hips, former dislocated hips.
Right.
So I was given books to read, and some of those books were Enid Blyton, the Adventurous Five, and the mystery.
The famous five.
The famous five.
You've misnamed them. They weren't famous then, you should have said. They weren't famous then, James. No one had heard of them. They were still just adventurous. No, I love the famous five and the Secret Seven. And I like the Magic Faraway Tree before I got onto the famous five with Moonface and Silky and the Saucepan Man.
Well, it was a long time ago because I'm 64 now.
Crikey. And what would have happened if you hadn't? I mean, because you get bored, presumably, a lot going in and out.
Yeah. So what happened was, after reading those books, I, at the age of 17, alone, took myself off on an adventure and went to live in Italy, met up with an Algerian girl, and we ended up hitchhiking from Italy across to North Africa. Crikey. And we hitchhiked through Tunisia, through Algeria, through Morocco. Then we went into Spain, Portugal, Spain, France, and I came back to England. And that journey and those adventures really came, from those books that I knew could change life.
Wow.
And I ended up, about 7 years ago, I wrote my own book about that journey. And it's called The Adventurous Spirit, Walking Between Two Worlds, and it's available on Amazon.
That's a bit cheeky, but given that I plug my own book so mercilessly on the programme, I can hardly tell you off, Kim, for doing the same.
I haven't told my name, though.
Well, go on then.
So it's Kim Alexis.
There we go.
And
it's available now on Amazon. If you want to find out more. I'm surprised I couldn't remember stuff from that long ago, but I'd go, well done. That's a lovely story as well, because I guess every writer actually started off as a reader, almost presumably, and without the reading, you never would have got on to the writing. Thank you, Kim. I am genuinely out of time. That's why we crack on. If you missed any of today's show, you can listen back to the whole show podcast on Global Player, where you can pause and rewind live radio. You'll find all of LBC's shows to catch up on, as well as the world's biggest podcasts, including Full Disclosure. Do pause and rewind live radio on Global Player. Get it from your app store or head to globalplayer.com. Coming up at 4 on LBC, it's Tom Swarbrick, but now it's time for Sheila Fogarty. 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 It's